The champagne flute shattered against marble, and Elena Brooks knew, before the laughter even started, that she'd been played. Across the glittering ballroom of the Westbridge Hotel, 100 pairs of eyes turned toward the charity table, where she sat beside a man in an off-the-rack suit, both of them surrounded by empty chairs like a quarantine zone. The seating chart had been a joke. They were the punchline. And as Caroline Ashworth's voice carried across the room, "Oh my God, they actually came!" Elena felt her daughter's college fund, her late husband's memory, and her own dignity all hanging by the thinnest thread. But the man beside her, this Adrian Cole with his calm eyes and calloused hands, didn't flinch. He simply folded his napkin, met her gaze, and said quietly, "Let them laugh. They always do, eh?" Something in his voice made her wonder, what if he'd heard it all before? What if he knew something she didn't? Want to see how Elena turns humiliation into power? Watch until the end, hit that like button, and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story reaches across the world. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago, embossed and elegant, addressed to Mrs. Elena Brooks in script so perfect it looked machine-generated, which it probably was. The Westbridge Foundation Annual Gala, black tie, 7 courses, silent auction benefiting youth education programs across the state. At the bottom, in smaller print, in honor of David Brooks, whose legacy continues to inspire. Elena had held that card for 20 minutes, standing in her kitchen while her 8-year-old daughter Mia ate cereal and asked why mommy was crying. She wasn't crying, not exactly, but David had been gone for 2 years, and sometimes the world still remembered him in ways that felt like reopening a wound just as it started to heal. He'd taught high school chemistry for 15 years, had founded a summer science program for underprivileged kids, had died of an aneurysm on a Tuesday afternoon while grading lab reports. No warning, no goodbye. Just there, and then gone. The foundation had given him a posthumous award last year. Elena hadn't attended, couldn't afford the babysitter, couldn't stomach the pity. But this year Mia was older, could stay with the neighbor, and the invitation felt less like an option and more like an obligation. David would have wanted her to go, would have said something about showing up, about honoring the work, about not letting grief turn her invisible. So she'd pulled her only good dress from the back of the closet, the navy one she'd worn to her cousin's wedding 4 years ago, and she'd practiced her smile in the mirror until it looked almost real. Now, standing in the Westbridge Hotel ballroom under chandeliers that probably cost more than her annual salary, Elena was regretting every decision that had led her here. The room was enormous, vaulted ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, tables draped in white linen that probably cost more to clean than her monthly grocery bill. Women in designer gowns clustered near the bar, diamonds catching the light with every gesture. Men in tailored tuxedos discussed stock portfolios and vacation homes in voices that carried the easy confidence of people who'd never worried about a mortgage payment. Elena clutched her small black purse, Target, 3 years old, clasped slightly bent, and tried to look like she belonged. "Can I help you find your table?" The woman who appeared at her elbow wore a headset and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Young, maybe 25, with the kind of polished competence that came from working too many events like this. "I'm, Elena Brooks. I should be—" "Brooks," the woman scrolled through a tablet. "Table 12? Something flickered across her face. A hesitation. Then the professional mask snapped back into place. "This way." Elena followed her through the crowd, weaving between tables marked with numbers and elegant calligraphy. Table 1 was near the front, closest to the stage where a podium stood waiting. Tables 2 through 6 formed a semicircle around it. 7 through 11 filled the middle section, each surrounded by well-dressed guests already deep in conversation. Table 12 was in the back corner, near the kitchen doors. Elena felt her stomach drop. "Here you are." The woman gestured to a table set for 8. 7 chairs were empty. One was occupied by a man Elena had never seen before. He looked up as she approached, and for a moment their eyes met. He was maybe 40, with dark hair starting to gray at the temples, wearing a suit that was clean but definitely not custom-made. The kind of suit you bought off the rack at a department store and had altered at the tailor in the strip mall. His tie was straight, his shoes polished, but there was something about him that didn't quite match the room. His hands, resting on the table, were broad and slightly roughened, like someone who worked with them. His face had the kind of weathered quality that came from time spent outside, not in boardrooms. "Looks like we're the lucky ones," he said, his voice carrying a hint of dry humor. Elena managed a weak smile and sat down across from him, leaving an empty chair between them like a buffer. "Elena," she said. "Adrian." They shook hands across the table. His grip was firm, warm, exactly the kind of handshake David used to give, confident but not aggressive. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Around them, the ballroom hummed with conversation and laughter. Crystal clinked against crystal. A string quartet played something classical and expensive-sounding near the windows. "So," Adrian said eventually, glancing at the empty chairs surrounding them, "you win a contest, or are you here for the public humiliation?" Elena let out a startled laugh before she could stop herself. It came out louder than she intended, and a few people at nearby tables glanced over. "Both?" she offered. "Yeah, same." He leaned back in his chair, and his expression shifted into something that looked almost sympathetic. "Let me guess, they're honoring someone you knew, someone who actually gave a damn about people, and they invited you here to look good, to show they care about legacy and community, but they stuck you in the back corner because you don't have money to donate." Elena stared at him. "That's uncomfortably accurate." "It's the same script every time." Adrian picked up his water glass, took a sip. "I've been to enough of these things to recognize the pattern. The charity cases always get table 12, far enough back that the big donors don't have to look at us, close enough to the kitchen that we can smell what we're eating before it arrives." "You've been to a lot of these?" "More than I'd like." There was something in the way he said it, not bitter exactly, but weary, like someone who'd learned to expect disappointment. Elena wanted to ask more, but a sharp burst of laughter cut through the room. Near the bar, a cluster of women in evening gowns were looking in their direction. One of them, a blonde in a dress that probably cost more than Elena's car, leaned in to whisper something to her companion. They both laughed again. Adrian noticed. His jaw tightened slightly, but his expression stayed calm. "Don't worry about them," he said quietly. "I'm not worried. I'm just—" Elena stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence. Humiliated? Angry? Sad that David's memory had been reduced to this? "Yeah," Adrian said, like he understood without her having to explain. "Me too." The first course arrived, some kind of soup with foam on top and a single herb leaf artfully placed in the center. Elena picked up her spoon and tried to look like she ate food garnished with foam on a regular basis. "So, what's your story?" Adrian asked. "Who are they honoring?" "My late husband, David. He was a teacher, started a science program for kids who couldn't afford summer camps." "That's good work." "It was. He loved it." Elena stirred her soup without tasting it. "He died 2 years ago. Aneurysm. Just gone." "I'm sorry." The words were simple, but they sounded genuine. Not the performative sympathy people usually offered, the kind that felt more about making themselves feel better than actually acknowledging her loss. "You?" Elena asked. "Who brought you here?" "My daughter's school. I've been—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Supporting some of their programs. They thought it would be nice if I attended. And then they stuck you at table 12. Apparently supporting programs isn't the same as writing big checks at galas." Elena smiled despite herself. There was something refreshing about his honesty, the way he named the thing everyone else pretended not to see. Across the room, a woman in a red dress stood up at table 3. She was mid-50s, perfectly coiffed, with the kind of presence that came from years of commanding rooms like this. She tapped a fork against her wine glass, and the conversations gradually died down. "Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Caroline Ashworth, co-chair of the Westbridge Foundation." Applause rippled through the ballroom. Caroline smiled, waiting for it to subside. "We are so thrilled to see so many familiar faces tonight, and so many generous donors who make our work possible. Tonight, we celebrate the power of education, the importance of community, and the lasting impact of those who dedicate their lives to lifting others up." More applause. Elena glanced at Adrian. He was watching Caroline with an expression she couldn't quite read, focused but detached, like someone studying a script they'd seen before. "Before we begin the evening's program, I do want to acknowledge some special guests." Caroline's gaze swept across the room and landed briefly on table 12. Her smile didn't waver, but something sharp flickered in her eyes. We have several family members of past honorees joining us tonight, which is just wonderful. It's so important to remember that this work is bigger than any one person. It's about legacy, about continuing the mission even when the original visionaries are no longer with us. The words were gracious. The delivery was perfect, but Elena heard the subtext clearly. You're here because of someone else. You don't belong on your own merit. Beside her, Adrian's hand tightened slightly around his water glass. Caroline continued, introducing board members and major sponsors, each name greeted with enthusiastic applause. When she finally sat down, the room buzzed with renewed conversation. Jesus, Elena muttered under her breath. That's actually restrained for her, Adrian said quietly. I've seen worse. You know her? Of her. She runs in certain circles. Elena wanted to ask what circles, but their waiter arrived with the second course, some kind of fish with sauce drizzled in a pattern that looked like abstract art. They ate in silence for a while. The food was excellent, which somehow made the whole situation worse. Elena tried to focus on the flavor, on the careful presentation, on anything except the fact that she was sitting in the back corner of a room full of people who thought she was a charity case. I have a daughter, Adrian said suddenly. Sophie. She's 9. Elena looked up. Mia, she's 8. Single parent? Widowed. You? Divorced. 3 years now. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was the right call. He set down his fork. But raising a kid alone it's harder than anyone tells you. God, yes. The words tumbled out before Elena could stop them. No one prepares you for how exhausting it is. Not just the physical stuff, though that's brutal, but the mental load, the constant decision-making, the guilt about everything you're not doing right. Adrian nodded. Sophie's teacher called me last month because I forgot it was pajama day at school. Forgot. And I felt like the worst father on the planet because my kid was the only one in regular clothes. Mia had a meltdown last week because I bought the wrong kind of granola bars. Apparently there's a difference between chewy and crunchy, and I'm a monster for not knowing which one she prefers. They both laughed, and this time Elena didn't care who heard. You work? Adrian asked. Part-time at a medical office, front desk stuff, scheduling, insurance claims. It's flexible enough that I can do school pickup. Elena hesitated. David was the teacher. I was supposed to be the steady income, but after he died, I couldn't do the commute anymore. Couldn't do the full-time thing and still be there for Mia, so I took something closer to home. Pays less, but your kid needs you more than she needs a bigger house. Exactly. Same. I used to work longer hours, but after the divorce, I had to scale back. Sophie needs stability more than she needs a college fund right now. There was something intensely relieving about this conversation, about talking to someone who understood the impossible math of single parenthood. Every parenting decision was a trade-off. Money for time, career for presence, self-care for just getting through the day. The third course arrived. Then the fourth. Between bites, Elena and Adrian traded stories. He told her about Sophie's obsession with marine biology, how she made him watch documentaries about octopuses and could name 17 species of jellyfish. Elena told him about Mia's love of theater, how she'd performed an entire scene from Frozen in the grocery store last month and received a standing ovation from the produce section. Does she want to be an actress? Adrian asked. I think she just wants attention, Elena said. Which, makes sense. She lost her dad. She's trying to figure out how to be seen. Adrian's expression softened. That's pretty insightful. Therapy helps. For both of us. Yeah. Same. Around them, the gala continued. Speeches were made, awards were presented, a video montage played on a screen above the stage, showing smiling children in classrooms, teachers receiving grants, success stories narrated in an uplifting voiceover. Elena watched David's face appear for 3 seconds in a group photo, one teacher among many. No mention of his name, no acknowledgement of what he'd built. She felt Adrian's gaze on her. You okay? He asked quietly. I don't know why I expected more, Elena admitted. They sent the invitation. I thought maybe they'd actually talk about him, about the program he created, but it's just generic inspiration. They don't see people. They see optics. Adrian's voice had an edge now. This whole night is about making rich people feel good about themselves. Your husband's work is just a prop in their story. Elena wanted to argue, to defend the foundation's mission, but she couldn't. Because he was right. The silent auction results were announced. Someone had paid $8,000 for a weekend at a vineyard in Napa. Someone else had bid $12,000 for courtside basketball tickets. The amounts were thrown around casually, like pocket change. Elena thought about her rent payment, due in 6 days. Thought about the medical bills she was still paying off from David's hospitalization, even though he'd been gone for 2 years. Thought about how she'd spent 30 minutes at the grocery store last week trying to decide if she could afford the name brand peanut butter or if the store brand was close enough. "I need some air," she said abruptly, standing up. "Want company?" She almost said no, instinct born from 2 years of handling everything alone, but something stopped her. Yeah, actually yes. They left table 12 and headed toward the doors leading to the terrace. Elena was aware of people watching them, of whispers following in their wake, but she kept her head up and didn't look back. Outside, the November air was cold and sharp. The terrace overlooked the city, lights stretching out in all directions. Elena leaned against the railing and let the wind sting her face. "I shouldn't have come," she said. Adrian stood beside her, hands in his pockets. Probably not. David would have hated this. He hated performative charity. Used to say the real work happened in classrooms and community centers, not ballrooms. He sounds like he was a good man. He was. He really was. Elena's voice cracked, and now his memory is just another line item on their tax-deductible donations. For a moment, they stood in silence. Then Adrian spoke, his voice thoughtful. "I think people like your husband, people who do real work, who show up every day without recognition, they don't need galas to prove their worth. The impact is already there. The kids he taught, the programs he built, that's the legacy. Not this." He gestured back toward the ballroom. "This is just theater." Elena turned to look at him. In the dim light from the windows, his face looked serious, almost sad. "You sound like you've given this speech before," she said. "Maybe once or twice." "Who hurt you, Adrian?" He laughed, but it was hollow. "That's a long story. We've got time. I'm not going back in there anytime soon." Adrian considered this, then shrugged. "My ex-wife left because I wasn't ambitious enough. That's what she said. I was working construction, doing project management for commercial buildings. Good money, stable hours, but not impressive enough for her country club friends. She wanted someone who looked better on paper, who drove a nicer car, who could name drop at parties." "That's awful." "It's honest, at least. Better than pretending it was about compatibility or growing apart." He exhaled slowly. "But it taught me something. Taught me that a lot of people can't see value unless it comes with a price tag. And if you're not expensive, you're not worth noticing. Hence table 12. Hence table 12. They stood there, two strangers who'd been thrown together as a joke, and Elena felt something unexpected. Connection. Real, unfiltered recognition of shared experience. "My daughter asked me why I was getting dressed up tonight," Elena said. "I told her it was to honor her daddy, but honestly, I think I came because I wanted someone to see me, to acknowledge that I'm still here, still trying, still fighting to keep his memory alive while also just surviving day to day. Stupid, right?" "Not stupid. Human." The terrace door opened and a couple stepped out, laughing about something. They glanced at Elena and Adrian, then moved to the far end of the terrace, pointedly giving them space, like they were contagious. "We should go back in," Elena said, though she didn't move. "Should we?" "I paid for a babysitter. Might as well get my money's worth of humiliation." Adrian smiled, a real smile this time, reaching his eyes. "Okay, but if it gets too unbearable, we bail. Deal?" "Deal." They walked back inside together. The ballroom felt stuffier now, the air thick with perfume and self-importance. As they made their way back to table 12, Elena noticed Caroline Ashworth watching them from her seat at table 3. The woman leaned over to whisper something to the man beside her, silver-haired, expensive suit, probably a board member, and they both looked directly at Elena and Adrian. Caroline's expression was calculating, amused, like she was watching a social experiment unfold. Elena felt a flush of anger rise in her chest, but Adrian touched her elbow gently. "Ignore her," he murmured. "People like that feed on reactions." They sat back down. Dessert had been served in their absence, some kind of chocolate sculpture with gold leaf that looked too pretty to eat. Elena picked up her fork and took a bite. It was delicious and ridiculous in equal measure. $10 says it costs more than my monthly car insurance, she whispered. Only 10, I'd bet 50. They were mid-laugh when a voice interrupted them. Well, well, the charity cases are having fun. Elena looked up. Standing beside their table was a man she vaguely recognized from earlier, one of the major donors who'd been acknowledged during Caroline's opening remarks. He was holding a scotch and wearing a smirk that made her skin crawl. Excuse me? Elena said. Come on, you two know what this is, right? He gestured broadly at their table. Caroline's little social experiment. She does it every year. Invites the legacy guests, he made air quotes, and seats them together in the back to see if they'll actually mingle with the real donors or if they'll just sit in their corner and feel sorry for themselves. Adrian set down his fork slowly. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, became very still. That's inappropriate, Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady. Oh, relax, it's not personal. It's just, look, foundations need optics, right? They need to show they're connected to the real people they're helping. But let's be honest, nobody wants to actually sit with you. That's why you're back here. The man took a sip of his drink, clearly pleased with himself. Elena felt her face burning. Around them, conversations had quieted. People were watching now, sensing drama. I think you should leave, Adrian said quietly. Excuse me? You heard me. Walk away. The man laughed. Or what? You gonna throw a punch? This is a black tie gala, buddy, not a construction site. Adrian stood up. He wasn't particularly tall, maybe 5'11", but something about the way he moved made the other man take a step back. Let me be very clear, Adrian said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. You've had your fun, you've made your point. Now you're going to walk away, go back to your table, and spend the rest of the evening reflecting on what kind of person mocks grieving widows and single parents at a charity event. Who the hell do you think you are? Someone who's tired of watching bullies pretend they're philanthropists. For a moment, the tension hung there, sharp and bright. Elena held her breath, unsure what would happen next. Then Caroline Ashworth appeared, seeming to glide across the floor with practiced ease. Gentlemen, is there a problem? Her voice was smooth, practiced, the tone of someone used to diffusing situations at high-dollar events. No problem, the drunk donor said quickly. Just having a conversation. Caroline's eyes flicked to Adrian, then to Elena. Something unreadable passed across her face. Mr. Cole, she said carefully, I hope you're enjoying the evening. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. It's been educational. I'm sure. Caroline's smile was thin. Perhaps we should all take a moment to remember why we're here. This is a celebration of community and generosity. Let's keep it civil. The donor muttered something and walked away. Caroline lingered for a moment, her gaze fixed on Adrian with an intensity that made Elena uncomfortable. Enjoy your dessert, Caroline said finally, and then she too was gone. Adrian sat back down. His hands were steady, but Elena could see the tension in his shoulders. That was, she started. Typical, he finished. Like I said, same script every time. But there was something else now. Something in the way Caroline had looked at Adrian, the way she'd said his name. Like she knew him, like this wasn't the first time they'd been in the same room. Elena wanted to ask, but before she could, the lights dimmed. The evening's program was continuing. More speeches, more awards, more self-congratulatory applause. She and Adrian sat in silence, finishing their chocolate sculptures. Two people who'd been brought together as a punchline and found something genuine instead. When the event finally ended 2 hours later, Elena felt wrung out. Exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with staying up late and everything to do with emotional labor. As people filed toward the exits, collecting coats and saying goodbyes, she and Adrian remained at table 12, the last ones seated. Thank you, Elena said finally. For what? For not making me feel crazy. For seeing what I was seeing. Adrian nodded. Same. They stood up together. Around them, the ballroom was emptying, staff already moving in to clear tables. At the exit, Caroline Ashworth stood greeting departing guests, her smile perfect and plastic. Should we say goodbye? Elena asked. Why? She doesn't care if we leave. She got what she wanted. Her little social experiment proved whatever point she was trying to make. They walked toward the exit, keeping their distance from Caroline's farewell line. But as they reached the doors, Caroline's voice rang out across the room. Mr. Cole, a moment, please. Adrian stopped. Elena saw his jaw tighten. You go ahead, he told her quietly. I'll handle this. Are you sure? Yeah. But Elena, he pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to her. If you ever need anything, if Mia's school needs supplies for a science fair, or if you just want to talk to someone who gets it, call me. Elena looked down at the card. Simple, no-nonsense printing. Adrian Cole, followed by a phone number. No company name, no title. Thank you, she said again. She left him there and walked out into the November night, her breath fogging in the cold air. Behind her, through the glass doors, she could see Adrian approaching Caroline. They stood close, speaking in low voices. Caroline's expression was no longer amused. It was sharp, almost warning. Elena didn't know what their connection was, didn't know what was being said, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Adrian Cole was not who he appeared to be. And somehow that made her feel less alone than she'd felt in 2 years. She got into her car, a 10-year-old Honda with a dent in the passenger door from where she'd scraped a parking garage pillar 6 months ago, and sat there for a moment, holding Adrian's business card. Then she drove home to relieve her babysitter, to check on Mia, to return to the small, manageable life she'd built from the rubble of loss. But something had shifted tonight, something she couldn't quite name. The world was bigger than she'd remembered, and maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as invisible as everyone wanted her to believe. The babysitter, Mrs. Chen from 2 doors down, was asleep on the couch when Elena got home, reading glasses crooked on her face, a paperback romance novel splayed open on her chest. The TV played some late-night talk show on mute. Elena paid her $20 extra and apologized for being later than expected. No trouble at all, dear, Mrs. Chen said, gathering her things. Mia was an angel, asleep by 9. After she left, Elena kicked off her heels in the entryway and walked through the small house in her bare feet, checking locks, turning off lights. Mia's bedroom door was cracked open, nightlight casting a soft glow across the twin bed where her daughter slept curled around a stuffed elephant that used to be David's when he was a kid. Elena stood there for a moment, watching the rise and fall of Mia's breathing, feeling the familiar ache of love mixed with terror. This small person was everything. Every decision, every sacrifice, every humiliating gala attendance, it was all for her. Elena changed into sweatpants and an old t-shirt, washed her face, and climbed into bed. But sleep didn't come. She kept thinking about the evening, about table 12, about the way Caroline Ashworth had looked at Adrian like she was calculating something. And she thought about Adrian himself, his calm in the face of mockery, the steadiness in his voice when he'd told that drunk donor to walk away, the careful way he'd said people like that feed on reactions, as if he'd spent years learning that lesson. She pulled his business card from her purse and stared at it in the lamplight. Just a name and number. No logo, no company, no title. Who was he? Elena set the card on her nightstand and turned off the light, but her mind kept turning the evening over like a puzzle with missing pieces. 3 days later, she was at work when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hi, Elena. It's Adrian from the gala. Hope this isn't weird. Just wanted to check in and see how you're doing after that disaster of an evening. Elena stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, Not weird. I'm okay. Still recovering from the chocolate sculpture. His response came quickly. That thing probably cost more than my mortgage payment. Ours combined, probably. Listen, I know this is random, but Sophie has a marine biology presentation at school next week, and she's been practicing nonstop. If Mia likes that kind of thing, I thought maybe we could do a park meetup this weekend. Let the kids run around, give us a chance to decompress from gala trauma. Elena hesitated. It had been a long time since she'd made a new friend, and longer still since that friend had been a man. But something about Adrian felt safe, uncomplicated. Like he understood the specific exhaustion of single parenthood and wasn't trying to fix it or minimize it. Mia would love that. She's been driving me crazy with frozen songs. Needs to burn off energy. Perfect. Saturday at 10? Riverside Park, see you there. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright. Mia was vibrating with excitement, asking 1,000 questions about who this Sophie person was and whether she liked theater and if she'd ever been to Disney World. Elena did her best to answer while packing snacks, juice boxes, string cheese, apple slices, and trying not to overthink what this meetup meant. Riverside Park was crowded with weekend families, kids on the playground, dogs on leashes, joggers on the path that wound along the river. Elena spotted Adrian near the swings, wearing jeans and a fleece jacket, looking more relaxed than he had at the gala. Beside him stood a girl with dark curly hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing light-up sneakers and a sweatshirt with a cartoon octopus on it. "Hi," Adrian said when they approached. "This is Sophie." Sophie waved shyly. "Hi." "I'm Mia," Elena's daughter announced with the confidence of a Broadway performer. "I'm 8. Do you like singing?" Kind of. Do you want to see me do Let It Go?" "Mia," Elena warned, "maybe let Sophie warm up first." But Sophie was already smiling. "Okay, sure." And just like that, the kids were off, running toward the playground, leaving Elena and Adrian standing there like abandoned luggage. "That was easy," Adrian said. "Mia makes friends like it's an Olympic sport. I have no idea where she gets it from." David and I were both introverts. They started walking along the path, keeping the playground in sight. The morning air smelled like fallen leaves and coffee from the cart near the park entrance. Other parents clustered on benches, scrolling phones while half watching their children. "So," Elena said, "have you recovered from the gala?" "Mostly, although I did have a fun conversation with my ex-wife afterward." "Oh no." "Yeah, she saw photos on the foundation's social media. Apparently I was embarrassing Sophie by associating with those kinds of events." Elena stopped walking. "She said that?" Her exact words were, "Charity cases sitting in the back corner don't exactly scream successful co-parent." "That's awful." Adrian shrugged, but Elena could see the tension in his shoulders. "It's her thing. Everything's about appearances. Sophie could be happy and thriving, but if it doesn't look good to her friends, it's a problem." They walked in silence for a moment. On the playground, Mia was demonstrating some kind of elaborate hand gesture routine while Sophie watched, laughing. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said carefully. "Sure." "At the gala, when that guy came over to our table and you stood up, Caroline Ashworth knew your name. She called you Mr. Cole like she'd met you before. And the way she looked at you, it wasn't like she was just managing a situation. It was like she was warning you about something." Adrian's expression went carefully neutral. "You picked up on that?" "Hard not to." He was quiet for a long time, watching the river. Then he said, "I've had dealings with the Westbridge Foundation before, a few years ago. It didn't end well." "What kind of dealings?" "The kind where you learn that foundations care more about donor recognition than actual impact. I tried to fund a program directly. No gala, no press release, just money where it was needed. They wanted me to go through their formal channels, attend events, let them put my name on buildings. I refused. Caroline took it personally." "So she invited you to the gala and stuck you at table 12 as payback?" "Probably. She likes reminding people who's in control." Elena processed this. "But if you are funding programs, you must have money. Why would she treat you like a charity case?" Adrian smiled, but it was bitter. "Because I don't play the game. I don't network. I don't schmooze. I show up in off-the-rack suits and work boots and refuse to kiss the ring. People like Caroline can't stand that. It offends their sense of how the world should work." "So you're rich." "I do okay." That's not an answer. Adrian stopped walking and turned to face her. "I have money, yes, but I don't live like the people at that gala. I don't want to. My ex-wife did, and it destroyed our marriage. I work in construction management. I drive a truck that's 7 years old. I live in a regular house in a regular neighborhood. Sophie goes to public school. We eat dinner at the kitchen table. That's the life I want." Elena studied his face, looking for deception or performance, but she only saw sincerity. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it doesn't matter. At that gala, we were both outsiders, both people who didn't fit the script. Your husband died and left you struggling to keep his memory alive while raising a kid alone. That's real. My financial situation doesn't change the fact that we were both being humiliated for not being the right kind of people. He was right, and Elena knew it, but she still felt slightly off balance, like the ground had shifted beneath her. I'm not secretly a millionaire if that's what you're worried about, she said, trying for humor. Adrian laughed. I didn't think you were. But if it helps, I'm not secretly a billionaire either. I just have enough to be comfortable and enough to help programs that matter. That's it. They started walking again. On the playground, Sophie was now attempting to teach Mia some kind of complex handshake. Both girls were giggling. They're cute together, Adrian said. Yeah, Mia needs this, needs friends who aren't just from school, needs to see that the world is bigger than our little bubble. Same with Sophie. Her mom's friends all have kids who go to private schools and take piano lessons and have tutors. Sophie just wants to read about marine biology and play soccer. She doesn't fit that world. Does she see her mom often? Every other weekend. It's cordial. We make it work for Sophie's sake. But there's always this tension, this sense that I'm not doing it right because I'm not doing it her way. Elena understood that feeling. After David died, his parents had opinions about everything. Where Mia should go to school, what activities she should do, whether Elena was grieving correctly. They meant well, but it felt like constant judgment. Parenting is impossible, she said, completely impossible. And everyone has an opinion about how you're failing. Always. They reached a bench near the playground and sat down. The morning sun was warmer now, taking the edge off the November cold. Elena pulled out the snacks she'd packed and set them on the bench between them. You came prepared, Adrian said. I've learned that hungry children are violent children. He laughed, and Elena felt something in her chest ease. This was nice, easy, the kind of friendship she hadn't realized she'd been missing. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughters play. After a while, Sophie ran over, breathless and excited. Dad, can we go get hot chocolate? Sure, kiddo. Mia appeared a moment later. Mom, Sophie says there's a cart that sells hot chocolate with marshmallows shaped like snowmen. Is that so? Can we get some, please? Elena looked at Adrian, who shrugged. My treat. You don't have to. I know, but I want to. They walked to the cart together, kids bouncing ahead. The vendor, a tired-looking man with a kind smile, served them 4 hot chocolates in paper cups. The marshmallows were, in fact, shaped like snowmen, and Mia was thrilled. This is the best day, she announced, carefully sipping her drink so as not to melt the snowman too quickly. Sophie nodded in agreement. We should do this every week. I don't know about every week, Elena started, but Mia cut her off. Yes, every Saturday. Please, Mom. Elena looked at Adrian, who seemed amused. I'm fine with it if you are, he said. Okay, every Saturday. But you two have to promise to actually play and not just sit on the bench scrolling your phones. Deal, both girls said in unison, then collapsed into giggles. They spent another hour at the park before the kids started showing signs of exhaustion. As they walked back toward the parking lot, Sophie and Mia chattering about octopuses and Broadway shows in a conversational mashup that made no sense but somehow worked, Adrian fell into step beside Elena. Thank you for this, he said quietly. I should be thanking you. Mia hasn't been this happy in months. Same with Sophie. He paused. Listen, I know we just met, and this might be moving fast, but I think the girls really clicked. And honestly, I could use an adult friend who understands this whole single-parent thing, if you're interested. Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the hot chocolate. I'm interested. They exchanged phone numbers, actual numbers this time, not just his business card, and made plans for the following Saturday. As Elena buckled Mia into the car, her daughter was still talking a mile a minute about Sophie and octopuses and snowmen marshmallows. I like her, Mom. She's nice. I like her too, baby. Do you like her dad? Elena glanced in the rearview mirror at Mia's curious face. Yeah, I think I do. Good. You need friends too. Out of the mouths of 8-year-olds, Elena thought, and pulled out of the parking lot feeling lighter than she had in months. The next week passed in a blur of work and homework, and the usual chaos of single parenting. But on Wednesday evening, Elena's phone rang with an unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Brooks? This is Jennifer Martinez from the Westbridge Foundation. Elena's stomach dropped. Yes? I'm calling to follow up on the gala. We received some feedback about your experience, and Mr. Ashworth, that's Caroline's husband and our co-chair, would like to speak with you about your late husband's program. I don't understand. He was very impressed with the work David did and wants to discuss potential funding opportunities. Would you be available for a meeting next Tuesday? Elena's mind raced. This didn't make sense. Why now, after years of David's program barely getting mentioned? Why after that disaster of a gala? Can I ask what prompted this? She said carefully. There was a pause. I'm not entirely sure, Mrs. Brooks. I just know that Mr. Ashworth was quite insistent about setting up this meeting. He said it was important. Okay, yes, Tuesday works. Wonderful. I'll send you the details via email. And Mrs. Brooks, we're really looking forward to continuing David's legacy. After she hung up, Elena stared at her phone, trying to make sense of what just happened. Then she texted Adrian. Something weird just occurred. Can I call you? His response was immediate. Of course. She stepped outside onto the small back porch so Mia wouldn't overhear and dialed his number. What's going on? Adrian asked. Elena explained the call, the sudden interest from the foundation, the strange timing. That's Caroline's move, Adrian said, and she could hear the frustration in his voice. She does this. She humiliates people publicly, then swoops in with an offer to make things right. It makes her look magnanimous while also keeping people dependent on her approval. So I shouldn't take the meeting? No, you should definitely take it. But go in with your eyes open. Whatever they're offering, it's going to come with strings. What kind of strings? The kind where they own the narrative, where David's program becomes their program, where you show up at galas and smile for photos and thank them publicly for their generosity. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. I don't want that. I know. But here's the thing. They have resources you need. If they're genuinely offering to fund the program, that could help a lot of kids. You just have to decide if you can live with the compromises. Did you? When they wanted to put your name on buildings? Adrian was quiet for a moment. No, I couldn't. But my situation was different. I had the luxury of walking away. You might not. Elena leaned against the porch railing, staring out at her small backyard where Mia's soccer ball sat abandoned in the grass. David would hate this. He'd tell me to turn them down, to find another way. Maybe. Or maybe he'd tell you to use every tool available to help those kids, even if it meant playing a game he didn't like. You didn't know him. No, but I know what it's like to want to do right by someone's memory while also living in reality. And reality is complicated. Elena closed her eyes. I hate that you're right. Yeah, me too. They talked for another 20 minutes, Adrian walking her through what to expect in the meeting, what questions to ask, what red flags to watch for. By the time they hung up, Elena felt slightly less terrified and slightly more prepared. Mom? Mia's voice came through the screen door. Who are you talking to? Just a friend, baby. Is it Sophie's dad? Maybe. Are you guys like boyfriend and girlfriend now? What? No, we're just friends. Okay. But if you were boyfriend and girlfriend, that would be fine. He seems nice. Elena came back inside and found Mia curled up on the couch with her homework. When did you get so wise? I was born wise. You just didn't notice. Fair enough. That night, after Mia was asleep, Elena pulled out the old file box where she kept David's papers. His teaching materials, letters from former students, the original grant proposal for his summer science program. She read through it all, trying to reconnect with his vision, his passion, his belief that every kid deserved access to education regardless of their family's income. He'd written in one letter to a donor, "This isn't charity, this is investment. These kids aren't broken things that need fixing. They're brilliant minds that need opportunity. The return on this investment will be scientists, engineers, teachers who change the world, but only if we give them the chance." Elena pressed the letter to her chest and let herself cry, not from sadness exactly, but from the weight of trying to honor something bigger than herself, while also just trying to survive. Tuesday arrived too quickly. Elena took a half day off work, dropped Mia at school, and drove to the Westbridge Foundation's office in the financial district. The building was all glass and steel, lobby filled with abstract art that probably cost more than Elena's annual salary. She gave her name to the receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and a practiced smile, and was directed to the elevators. 14th floor, Mr. Ashworth's office is at the end of the hall. The elevator was mirrored on all sides, and Elena caught multiple reflections of herself. Navy dress pants, white blouse, minimal jewelry. She looked professional, competent, like someone who belonged in a building like this. The illusion was almost convincing. The 14th floor was quieter than the lobby, carpeted hallways leading to offices with frosted glass doors. At the end of the hall, a brass nameplate read, Richard Ashworth, co-chair. Elena knocked. Come in. The office was enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, massive desk, leather furniture that looked hand-stitched. Richard Ashworth stood up from behind his desk. Mid-60s, silver hair, expensive suit. He looked like the kind of man who'd never worried about a mortgage payment in his life. Mrs. Brooks, thank you for coming. His handshake was firm but perfunctory. Please, sit. Elena sat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. It was lower than his chair, she noticed. A power move. I'll get right to the point, Richard said, settling back into his seat. My wife Caroline told me about the gala, about your table placement. I want to apologize for that. It was inappropriate and not reflective of how we value the families of our honorees. Thank you, Elena said, though she didn't believe him for a second. Your late husband did remarkable work. The summer science program he created has served nearly 200 students over the years. That's significant impact. It was his passion. And we'd like to expand it, double the enrollment, extend the program to 8 weeks instead of 6, bring in additional teachers and resources. We're prepared to fund this expansion fully. Elena's heart jumped. That's incredible. David would have been thrilled. There are some conditions, of course. There it was. Elena kept her expression neutral. What kind of conditions? The program would operate under the Westbridge Foundation umbrella. We'd handle all logistics, fundraising, marketing. You would serve on the advisory board, provide input on curriculum, represent the program at donor events. Donor events, like the gala. Exactly. We'd need you to be visible, to tell David's story, to help us connect with potential supporters. Your lived experience is valuable, Mrs. Brooks. People respond to authentic stories. Elena felt something twist in her gut. This was exactly what Adrian had warned her about. They wanted to package her grief, her struggle, her late husband's work into a neat narrative that made rich people feel good about writing checks. And if I say no? She asked. Richard's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Then I'm afraid we wouldn't be able to move forward with the expansion. We need a spokesperson, someone who embodies the mission. Without that, there's no story. And without a story, there's no funding. Elena sat very still in the leather chair, feeling the weight of Richard Ashworth's ultimatum settle over her like a heavy blanket. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretched out in all directions, buildings and traffic and thousands of people going about their lives, completely unaware that in this moment, in this office, she was being asked to sell something she wasn't sure she had the right to sell. Can I have some time to think about it? She asked, keeping her voice steady. Richard's smile was practiced, patient. Of course, but I should mention that we have other programs under consideration for our spring funding cycle. If we don't move forward with David's program, those resources will go elsewhere. How much time? Let's say by the end of the week. That gives you 4 days. 4 days to decide whether to turn her late husband's work into a marketing tool or watch it die from lack of funding. 4 days to figure out if she could live with herself either way. I'll have an answer for you by Friday, Elena said, standing up. Richard stood as well, extending his hand again. I hope you'll say yes, Mrs. Brooks. This could be transformative, not just for the program, but for you and your daughter. Financial security, professional opportunities, a real platform to honor David's memory. Elena shook his hand because refusing would have been rude, but she couldn't make herself smile. Thank you for your time. The elevator ride down felt longer than the ride up. Elena watched the floor numbers descend, 14, 13, 12, and tried to sort through the tangle of thoughts in her head. In the lobby, she walked past the expensive abstract art and out into the cold November afternoon, pulling out her phone before she even reached her car. Adrian answered on the second ring. How did it go? Exactly like you said it would. They want to expand the program, full funding, but only if I become their spokesperson. Show up at events, tell David's story on demand, make rich people feel good about themselves. And if you refuse? Then the money goes somewhere else and the program stays small or dies completely. She heard Adrian exhale. Where are you right now? Parking garage. About to drive home. Don't. Come to my office. We should talk about this in person. I don't want to impose. Elena, come to my office. He gave her an address in the industrial district, about 15 minutes away. Elena plugged it into her phone's GPS and drove through midday traffic, her mind spinning. By the time she pulled up to the address Adrian had given her, she'd almost convinced herself 3 different times to just say yes to Richard's offer and 3 different times talked herself back out of it. The building was older, brick and concrete, with a sign that read Coal Construction Management in simple lettering. The parking lot was half full of trucks and work vehicles. Elena parked her Honda between a pickup with a toolbox in the bed and a van with ladders strapped to the roof, feeling distinctly out of place in her office clothes. Inside, the reception area was utilitarian, concrete floors, metal furniture, a desk where a woman in her 50s sat typing on a computer. She looked up when Elena entered. Can I help you? I'm here to see Adrian Cole. He's expecting me. The woman's expression shifted into something warmer. You must be Elena. I'm Patricia. Adrian said you'd be stopping by. He's upstairs, second floor, office at the end of the hall. Thank you. Elena climbed the stairs, her heels clicking on the metal steps. The second floor was open plan. Drafting tables, computers, filing cabinets, a break room with a coffee maker that looked like it had seen better days. A few people were working at desks, phones pressed to their ears or focused on blueprints. No one looked up as she passed. Adrian's office was at the end of the hall, door open. It was smaller than Richard Ashworth's by a factor of 10, with windows that looked out over the parking lot instead of the city skyline. The desk was cluttered with papers, a laptop, coffee cups, and various states of empty. Adrian stood when she entered, and she noticed he'd rolled up his sleeves, exposing forearms that were definitely the result of actual physical work, not a gym membership. That was fast, he said. I drive aggressively when I'm stressed. Fair enough. Sit. Want coffee? It's terrible, but it's hot. I'll pass. Elena sat in the chair across from his desk. Normal height, she noticed, not a power move in sight. Adrian settled back into his own chair and waited. They're offering everything, Elena said. Full funding, program expansion, resources David only dreamed about. And all I have to do is show up at galas and smile and tell our story to people who humiliated me 2 weeks ago. That's the trade. It feels like I'm selling him, like I'm turning his work into a commodity. Adrian leaned forward, elbows on his desk. Can I tell you something? When I first started making real money, and I mean real money, not just comfortable but actually wealthy, I thought I could fund programs directly and skip all the foundation bureaucracy. I thought I could just write checks to schools and community centers and cut out the middlemen. What happened? I learned that money without infrastructure doesn't work. Schools couldn't accept direct donations without tax complications. Programs needed legal frameworks and insurance and oversight. The foundations exist for a reason, even if the people running them are insufferable. They have the systems in place to actually move resources where they're needed. So you're saying I should take the deal? I'm saying it's more complicated than sell out or stay pure. If you say yes, 200 kids become 400 kids. David's program survives and grows. That's real impact. But you're right that there's a cost. You'll have to perform your grief for people who see you as a story, not a person. You'll have to be grateful to people like Caroline Ashworth, who think humiliation is funny. That's the price. Elena pressed her palms against her eyes. I don't know if I can do that. Then don't. She looked up. But the kids, there are other ways to help kids. Smaller ways, maybe. Slower ways. But if this breaks you, if playing this game destroys what's left of your spirit, then it's not worth it. David wouldn't want that. You didn't know David. No, but I know you. And in the 2 weeks since that gala, you've been honest and funny and real. If you take this deal and it turns you into someone who performs instead of lives, then you'll hate yourself. And your daughter will notice. Elena felt tears prick at her eyes and tried to blink them away. I hate that there's no good answer. Welcome to being an adult. It's all impossible choices and regret. Despite everything, Elena laughed. You're not great at pep talks. I know. Sophie tells me that regularly. They sat in silence for a moment. Through the window, Elena could see workers loading equipment into trucks, normal people doing normal work, their lives uncomplicated by foundations and legacies and moral quandaries. What would you do? She asked finally. Adrian considered this carefully. I'd take the meeting with Richard again. I'd tell him, yes, you'll be their spokesperson, but on your terms. You'll attend events, but you get to approve what you say and how David's story is told. You'll represent the program, but you get a seat on the actual decision-making board, not just an advisory position. You'll help them fundraise, but a percentage of donations has to go directly to program costs, not administrative overhead. You think he'd agree to that? I think he needs you more than you need him. Right now, that program is just numbers on a spreadsheet. But you make it real. You make it a story donors can connect to. That's valuable. Don't give it away for free. Elena pulled out her phone and opened the Notes app, typing quickly. Okay, what else? Get everything in writing. Timeline for the expansion, budget breakdown, your specific role and compensation, because you should be compensated for this, Elena. Don't let them pretend it's all volunteerism, and an exit clause. If they violate the terms, you can walk away without penalty. This sounds like you've negotiated these things before. Once or twice. Elena finished typing and looked up at him. Why are you helping me? We barely know each other. Adrian's expression softened. Because I wish someone had helped me when I was trying to figure this stuff out. I made mistakes, burned bridges, learned everything the hard way. And because Sophie really likes Mia, and if you disappear from our lives because a foundation crushed your spirit, I'll have to explain to my 9-year-old why her new friend isn't coming to the park anymore. That's manipulative. I know. Is it working? Unfortunately. Adrian stood up and grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. Come on. I'm taking you to lunch. You need to eat something before you go home and stress spiral. I don't stress spiral. Elena, I've known you for 2 weeks and I've already seen you stress spiral twice. Fine, but nowhere fancy. I can't handle fancy right now. There's a taco place 2 blocks from here. Plastic chairs, salsa that'll burn your face off. Absolutely zero ambiance. Perfect. They left the office together and Patricia waved as they passed the front desk. Outside, the November air was cold enough to sting, and Elena was grateful for it. The physical discomfort of the cold was easier to handle than the emotional discomfort of the decision she was facing. The taco place was exactly as advertised, a hole in the wall with 6 tables, a counter where you ordered, and a menu written in marker on a whiteboard. They got carnitas and al pastor and horchata, and sat at a table near the window. This is good, Elena said around a mouthful of taco. I know, I come here twice a week. Does Sophie like it? She's obsessed with the chips, eats her weight in them every time. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. The lunch rush filled the small space with construction workers and delivery drivers, everyone focused on their food and their phones. It felt real in a way the Westbridge Foundation office hadn't. People working hard, taking a break, then going back to work. No performance, no pretension. Can I ask you something? Elena said, wiping salsa from her chin with a napkin. Sure. What happened with the foundation? You said you'd had dealings with them before and it didn't end well. What did they do? Adrian set down his taco and took a drink of horchata, clearly deciding how much to share. 3 years ago, right after my divorce, I wanted to fund a scholarship program for kids from low-income families. Full ride to college, mentorship, the works. I approached the Westbridge Foundation because they had infrastructure in place for that kind of thing. Caroline was very enthusiastic at first, said it was exactly the kind of program they wanted to support. But she wanted to attach conditions. The scholarships would be called the Ashworth Scholars Program, not the Cole Program. I'd have to attend quarterly galas and donor dinners. I'd have to let them feature my story, divorced dad rebuilding his life through philanthropy, that whole narrative. And when I said no, when I said I just wanted to fund the program quietly without making it about me, she got offended. What did she do? Told other foundations that I was difficult to work with, spread rumors that I was using philanthropy for tax evasion, made it harder for me to fund programs through legitimate channels. Adrian's voice was calm, but Elena could hear the anger underneath. She couldn't stand that I didn't need her validation, couldn't stand that I had resources but refused to play the game. That's vindictive. That's Caroline. Everything is about power and control. She doesn't do philanthropy because she cares about people. She does it because it gives her a platform to be important. Elena thought about the gala, about the way Caroline had looked at them at table 12 like they were a science experiment. So when she seated us together in the back corner, she was sending a message to you, to me, to everyone in that room. This is what happens when you don't fit the script. But you didn't react. You just sat there and had a normal conversation with me. Because that's how you win with people like Caroline. You refuse to give them what they want. They want humiliation, embarrassment, anger. If you just exist calmly and don't apologize for who you are, it drives them crazy. Elena finished her taco and started on another one. I think I'm starting to understand why Richard Ashworth wants me to say yes so badly. Why's that? Because if I say no, it proves that they don't actually have the power they think they have. It proves that David's work exists independent of their foundation, and that they need us more than we need them. Adrian smiled. Now you're getting it. But I still haven't solved the problem. Those kids still need the program, and I still can't fund it myself. No. But now you know what you're negotiating with, and you know what leverage you have. They finished lunch and walked back toward Adrian's office. The afternoon sun was trying to break through the clouds, not quite succeeding, but making the effort. Elena felt steadier than she had in the parking garage, like the impossible decision had become slightly less impossible. Thank you, she said when they reached her car. For terrible tacos and cynical advice? For caring. For not pretending this is simple when it's not. Adrian looked like he wanted to say something else, but his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. It's Sophie's school. I should take this. Go. I'm fine. He answered the call as he walked back toward the building, and Elena got into her car. She sat there for a moment, watching him through the window of the reception area, pacing as he talked. Then she pulled out her phone and texted him. Dinner Saturday after the park? My place. I'll cook. Nothing fancy. Just thanks for being a decent human. His response came 5 minutes later. Sophie says yes before I even finished reading your text. Apparently we're coming. Elena smiled and started the car. She had 4 days to figure out what to tell Richard Ashworth. 4 days to decide if she could live with performing her grief or live with letting David's program stagnate. 4 days to become someone who could negotiate with people who saw her as a story instead of a person. It felt completely impossible, and maybe barely possible at the same time. When she got home, Mia was already there. The bus dropped her at Mrs. Chen's house on days when Elena worked late. She found them in Mrs. Chen's kitchen, Mia eating apple slices and telling some elaborate story about recess. Mom! Mia jumped up. Can Sophie come over on Saturday? Her dad said they might. Already invited. They're coming for dinner. Yes. Mia did a little dance. Can we make spaghetti? Sophie said she likes spaghetti. Sure, baby. Spaghetti it is. That night, after Mia was asleep, Elena spread out papers on the kitchen table. David's old grant proposal, the foundation's preliminary funding offer that had arrived via email, notes from her conversation with Adrian. She made a list of non-negotiables, control over how David's story was told, actual decision-making power, fair compensation, exit clause. Then she practiced saying them out loud until they sounded confident instead of desperate. The next 3 days passed in a blur of work and research and second-guessing. Elena called the high school where David had taught and spoke to his former principal, who confirmed that yes, the summer science program was needed, and yes, expansion would help more kids, but also yes, the foundation could be difficult to work with. She called 2 of David's former colleagues who'd helped run the program and got similar feedback, grateful for resources but frustrated by bureaucracy. By Thursday evening, Elena had her answer. She called Richard Ashworth's office and left a message with his assistant. She'd meet with him Friday morning, and she had terms to discuss. Friday arrived cold and gray, threatening snow. Elena dressed carefully. Same navy pants, same white blouse, but this time she added David's watch, the one she'd kept in her jewelry box for 2 years because wearing it felt too painful. Today, it felt right, like he was with her. Richard's office looked the same as before. Intimidating windows, leather furniture, power dynamics built into the architecture. But this time, Elena didn't sit in the chair he offered. She stayed standing. "I've thought about your offer," she said without preamble, "and I have conditions." Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. "Conditions?" "I'll be your spokesperson. I'll attend events, help with fundraising, tell David's story, but I get approval over how that story is told. No scripting my words, no putting narratives in my mouth that I don't agree with." "That's reasonable. I'm not finished. I want a seat on the actual board, not the advisory committee. I want voting power on how the program operates and where the money goes. I want a contract that specifies exactly what my role is and how much time I'm expected to contribute. And I want to be compensated. Not token volunteer appreciation, actual payment for my time." Richard's expression had gone from patient to calculating. "Those are significant asks. They're fair asks. You need me to make this program compelling to donors. I need to know that I'm not just being used as a prop. This is a partnership where it's nothing. And if we say no?" Elena had practiced this moment in her head 100 times. "Then I take David's program elsewhere. There are other foundations, other funding sources. It might take longer and be harder, but I'll find a way that doesn't require me to sell my integrity." It was a bluff. She had no idea if she could actually do that, but Richard didn't know that. He studied her for a long moment, and Elena forced herself to meet his gaze without flinching. Finally, he smiled. A real smile, not the practiced one. "You've been talking to Adrian Cole." Elena didn't confirm or deny. "Smart. He knows how this game works." Richard walked to the window and looked out at the city. "Here's what I can offer. Board seat, yes. Compensation, yes. Though it'll be structured as a consulting contract to keep things clean. Approval over your story, within reason. We'll work together on messaging, but final say is yours. But I need you committed for at least 2 years. This only works if there's continuity. 1 year, renewable if both parties agree. I'm not locking myself into something I might regret. 18 months. Done." Richard turned back to face her. "I'll have the lawyers draft a contract. You should have a lawyer review it." "I will." "Good." He extended his hand. "Welcome to the Westbridge Foundation, Mrs. Brooks. I think this is going to be a productive partnership." Elena shook his hand, feeling both victorious and slightly terrified. "I hope so." She left the office with her head up and her heart pounding. In the elevator, she let herself breathe for what felt like the first time in an hour. When she reached the lobby, she pulled out her phone and texted Adrian. Did the thing. Got the board seat and the compensation. Probably made a deal with the devil, but at least I negotiated the terms. His response was immediate. "Proud of you. See you tomorrow for spaghetti." Elena walked out into the November cold and drove to pick up Mia from school. Her daughter came running out of the building with her backpack bouncing, face lit up with excitement about something that had happened at lunch. Elena hugged her tight and listened to the story about a boy who'd brought a lizard to school and how the teacher had screamed and everyone had laughed. "Did you have a good day, Mom?" Mia asked when they were in the car. "Yeah, baby, I think I did." "You look happy." "I feel happy." That night, Elena made Mia's favorite dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup, and they ate on the couch while watching a cooking competition show. During commercials, Mia talked about what she wanted to do on Saturday when Sophie came over, and Elena made a mental list of groceries she'd need to buy. "Mom?" Mia said during one commercial break. "Yeah?" "Is Sophie's dad your boyfriend?" Elena nearly choked on her soup. "What? No, we're friends." "But you smile differently when you talk about him." "I do not." "You totally do. It's okay if you like him. I think you should have a boyfriend. You're too young to be alone forever." "I'm not alone. I have you." "That's different. I mean, like a grown-up person to do grown-up stuff with." Elena set down her soup bowl and looked at her daughter. "Where is this coming from?" Mia shrugged. "Sophie said her dad is happier now than he used to be, and you're happier now too. So maybe you're both happy because of each other. Or maybe we're both happy because you two are friends. And it's nice to have people who understand what it's like to be a single parent." "Sure, Mom, whatever you say." The knowing tone in Mia's voice made Elena laugh despite herself. When did you get so wise? I told you, born that way. Saturday morning arrived with actual snow. Not much, just a dusting that made everything look clean and new. Mia was up early, vibrating with energy, asking every 5 minutes when Sophie was going to arrive. Elena made breakfast and checked the recipe for spaghetti sauce 3 times, even though she'd made it 100 times before. At 10 o'clock, they headed to Riverside Park. The playground was less crowded than usual, other families probably deterred by the cold and snow. Sophie and Adrian were already there, both wearing winter coats and hats. Sophie ran to Mia immediately, and the 2 girls took off toward the swings. Morning, Adrian said. Morning. Thanks for braving the weather. Sophie would have walked here barefoot if I'd tried to cancel. She's been talking about this all week. They started their usual walk along the path. The river looked gray and choppy, snow dusting the banks. Other joggers and dog walkers passed them, everyone moving quickly in the cold. So, Adrian said, tell me about yesterday. Elena recounted this meeting with Richard, the negotiation, the final terms. Adrian listened carefully, asking questions about specific clauses and timelines. You did well, he said when she finished. Better than well. You went in there prepared and came out with leverage. I kept thinking about what you said, about knowing what I was negotiating with. You did the hard part. Now you just have to follow through. That's the part I'm worried about. What if I can't do it? What if I show up at the next gala and freeze? Then you freeze, and then you unfreeze and keep going. Nobody does this perfectly. They walked in silence for a while. Up ahead, Sophie and Mia were building a tiny snowman on a bench, using sticks for arms and a bottle cap for a nose. Can I tell you something? Elena said. Always. I'm terrified that this is all going to blow up, that I'm going to mess it up and lose the funding, and David's program will die and it'll be my fault. Okay, and I don't know. I guess I just needed to say it out loud. Adrian stopped walking and turned to face her. Elena, you're doing something incredibly hard. You're trying to honor your late husband's work while also protecting yourself and your daughter. You're negotiating with people who have way more power and resources than you do, and you're doing it while working part-time and raising an 8-year-old alone. If you mess up, which you probably will because everyone messes up, it won't be because you didn't try hard enough. It'll be because the system is rigged against people like us. People like us? People who aren't rich enough or connected enough or willing to play the game exactly the way the powerful people want us to. But here's the thing, even in a rigged system, you can still win, just not the way they expect you to. Elena felt something loosen in her chest. How did you get so good at this? Years of being angry and then learning to channel it into something useful. He smiled. Also therapy. Lots and lots of therapy. Same. They collected the girls and headed back to Elena's house. Mia and Sophie ran ahead, throwing tiny snowballs at each other and shrieking with laughter. Elena and Adrian followed at a slower pace, comfortable in their silence. At the house, Elena got the girls set up with coloring books at the kitchen table while she started on the spaghetti sauce. Adrian offered to help, and she put him in charge of garlic bread. They worked side by side in the small kitchen, occasionally bumping elbows, and it felt natural in a way Elena hadn't expected. Sophie told me she wants to be a marine biologist, Elena said, chopping onions. This week. Last month she wanted to be a veterinarian. Month before that, an astronaut. That's normal. Mia wants to be everything. Yesterday it was a Broadway star. Today it might be a firefighter. Do you ever wonder what we're supposed to tell them about careers, like follow your dreams, but also be realistic, but also don't give up, but also have a backup plan? All the time. I have no idea what I'm doing. Thank goodness. I thought it was just me. They finished cooking and called the girls to the table. Dinner was loud and messy, with Sophie explaining octopus facts in between bites of spaghetti and Mia performing a scene from a musical she'd made up on the spot. Elena watched Adrian laugh at something Sophie said, watched the easy affection between father and daughter, and felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Hope that maybe life could be more than just survival. After dinner, while the girls played in the living room, Elena and Adrian cleaned up the kitchen. She washed, he dried, and they fell into an easy rhythm. This was nice, Adrian said quietly. Yeah, it was. We should do it more often. Agreed. He set down the dish towel and turned to face her. Elena, I need to tell you something. Her heart jumped. Okay. I like spending time with you, and I know we said we were just friends, and we can absolutely keep it that way if that's what you want. But I think you should know that I'm interested in more than friendship, and I'm willing to wait until you're ready, if you're ever ready, because I know you're still grieving, and I don't want to pressure you. But I needed to say it, so you know. Elena stood at the sink with soapy hands, looking at this man who'd shown up at exactly the right moment and been exactly the right kind of person. She thought about David, about the life they'd had together, about the fact that she'd probably always love him and always miss him. But she also thought about Mia's question, "You're too young to be alone forever," and realized her daughter was right. "I'm not ready yet," she said carefully, "but I might be. Someday. And I'd like you to still be around when that day comes." Adrian smiled. "I can work with that." They went back to washing dishes like the conversation hadn't just shifted the entire landscape of their relationship. Elena scrubbed a pot with more focus than it required, aware of Adrian's presence beside her in a way she hadn't been 10 minutes ago. In the living room, Mia and Sophie were staging some kind of elaborate performance involving stuffed animals and a blanket fort, their voices carrying through the house in waves of laughter. "Do you want to tell the girls?" Adrian asked quietly, drying the last plate. "Tell them what? That we might date eventually? That seems premature." "Fair point. Sophie would have us married by Christmas if we gave her any indication this was happening. Mia would plan the wedding. She'd insist on theatrical lighting and a choreographed dance number." "That actually sounds amazing." Elena laughed and drained the sink, wiping her hands on a towel. "Let's just keep this simple for now. Friends who might be more than friends someday. The girls don't need to know the details." Agreed. But when they went back into the living room and sat down to watch the girls' performance, which involved a dramatic rescue of stuffed animals from an imaginary ocean, Mia caught Elena's eye and gave her a knowing smile that made it very clear she suspected something had changed. Adrian and Sophie left around 8, after Sophie extracted a promise that they'd come back next Saturday. Elena and Mia stood in the doorway waving as they drove away, cold air rushing into the house. "I like them," Mia said, closing the door. "Me too, baby." "Are you going to marry him?" "What? No, we're friends." "But you want to marry him eventually." Elena stared at her daughter. "How do you even know about this stuff? You're 8. "Mom, I have eyes. And also Taylor's older sister talks about boys all the time at pickup, and I listen." Mia headed toward the stairs. "It's okay if you like him. I approve." "Well, thank goodness for your approval." "You're welcome." Elena shook her head and went to clean up the living room. As she folded the blankets from the fort and picked up scattered crayons, she let herself think about Adrian's words, about the possibility of something more, about what it would mean to let someone new into the life she'd built from grief and determination. It felt terrifying and hopeful in equal measure. The next week brought the contract from Richard Ashworth's lawyers. Elena took it to a legal aid clinic that offered free consultations and spent an hour going through every clause with a tired attorney who looked like she'd seen too many bad contracts to be surprised by anything. "It's actually pretty fair," the attorney said, flipping through pages. "Compensation structure is reasonable, exit clause is clean, and you retained approval rights over your narrative. Whoever negotiated this knew what they were doing. I had help. Good help, apparently. My only suggestion would be to add a clause about intellectual property. Make sure that any recordings or transcripts of your story remain your property, not the foundation's." Elena made a note. "Anything else?" "Get everything about the program expansion in writing. Budget, timeline, oversight structure. Don't let them make verbal promises that aren't backed up by documentation." Elena thanked her and left with the contract covered in sticky notes and annotations. That evening, she emailed Richard's assistant with requested modifications. The response came back within an hour. Approved. They wanted her to start attending board meetings in January, with the first fundraising event scheduled for February. 2 months. She had 2 months to figure out how to be a professional grieving widow while also protecting the integrity of David's work. The thought kept her awake that night, staring at the ceiling while Mia slept down the hall. Eventually, she gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen, pulling out David's old files again. She read through letters from former students, grant reports, photos from summer sessions. There was David in a lab coat, goggles pushed up on his forehead, surrounded by teenagers in safety glasses mixing chemicals. There was David at a whiteboard covered in equations, marker in hand, mid-explanation. There was David at the end of summer celebration, students presenting their projects while parents watched and clapped. He'd been so alive in these photos, so present. And now Elena was supposed to package that aliveness into sound bites for rich people who'd never met him. Her phone buzzed with a text from Adrian. "Can't sleep? How did you know?" "Because I can't sleep either, and I figured you were probably doing the same thing." "Want to talk?" "Yes." He called instead of texting, and Elena took the phone out to the back porch so they wouldn't wake Mia. "Tell me what you're thinking," Adrian said. "I'm thinking that I signed a contract to perform my grief for 18 months, and I don't know if I can actually do it." "That's valid." "I keep looking at pictures of David and wondering what he'd think of all this. Would he be proud that his program is expanding? Or disappointed that I'm playing politics to make it happen?" Adrian was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you what I think?" "Please." "I think he'd be proud that you're fighting for those kids. I think he'd understand that sometimes you have to work within a broken system to create change. And I think he'd want you to take care of yourself and Mia first. And if that means walking away from this whole thing, he'd support that too." You sound very sure for someone who never met him." "I'm going off what you've told me about him, and everything you've said suggests he was a good man who cared about impact, not ego. Those kinds of people understand compromise." Elena pulled her jacket tighter against the cold. "I'm scared I'm going to mess this up." "You probably will. Not because you're bad at it, but because this is hard and you're human. But messing up isn't the same as failing. You can mess up and still do good work." "Is that from therapy?" "That's from 17 years of construction management and learning that perfect projects don't exist. You do your best, you fix problems as they arise, and you deliver something that works even if it's not exactly what you originally envisioned. I wish I'd met you years ago. I was a mess years ago. Married to the wrong person, working too much, not seeing what was important. You wouldn't have liked me." "I don't believe that." "It's true. I was so focused on proving I was successful that I forgot to actually live. Took a divorce and a custody battle to wake me up." Elena heard something in his voice. Regret, maybe, or the echo of old pain. "Do you miss it, being married?" "I miss the idea of partnership. I miss having someone to share the boring parts of life with. But I don't miss my ex-wife specifically. We were wrong for each other from the start, just too stubborn to admit it." "How long were you together?" 8 years married, 2 years dating before that. Sophie was the best thing to come out of it, but everything else was just slow-motion disaster." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It taught me what I actually want, which is someone who sees me as a person, not a project or a status symbol. Someone who doesn't need me to be more impressive than I am." Elena thought about David, about their quiet life together, about how he'd never needed her to be anything other than herself. "That's what I had, and I'm terrified of trying to find it again and failing." "What if you succeed?" The question hung in the cold night air. Elena didn't have an answer. They talked for another hour about nothing important: Sophie's upcoming science fair, Mia's obsession with a new animated movie, the leak in Adrian's office ceiling that kept getting worse. Eventually, Elena's teeth started chattering from the cold, and they said goodnight. Back inside, she checked on Mia, still asleep, elephant clutched tight, and climbed into bed. This time, sleep came easier. The next morning brought an email from Caroline Ashworth. Elena stared at the subject line, "Welcome to the team," for a full minute before opening it. "Elena, Richard told me you've accepted our offer. I'm thrilled to have you joining the foundation in an official capacity. I know we got off to a rocky start at the gala, and I want to apologize for any discomfort that evening may have caused. Sometimes our events don't go as smoothly as we'd like. I'm looking forward to working with you to honor David's legacy and expand the reach of his program. Let's schedule a coffee meeting soon to discuss strategy." Warmly, Caroline Elena read it 3 times, analyzing every word for hidden meaning. The apology felt hollow, the warmth felt performed, and the phrase, "our events," neatly absolved Caroline of any personal responsibility for the humiliation of Table 12. She forwarded it to Adrian with the message, "Is it just me, or is this the most passive-aggressive email ever written?" His response, "That's Caroline's specialty. She apologizes without actually admitting fault and makes it sound like you're both on the same team, when really she's just reasserting control. I'd respond with something brief and professional. Don't engage with the emotional subtext. Elena typed out a response. Thank you for reaching out. I look forward to our collaboration and to discussing the program expansion. I'm available for coffee next week if that works with your schedule. Short, professional, no emotional vulnerability. She hit send before she could second guess it. The board meeting invitation arrived 2 days later. January 15th, 10 o'clock. Westbridge Foundation Conference Room. Agenda attached. Elena opened the agenda and felt her stomach drop. 12 items, including quarterly financial review, program assessment, donor relations strategy, and an item labeled Brooks Program Expansion Discussion. They were calling it the Brooks Program now, not the David Brooks Summer Science Program that he'd named carefully to be specific and clear. Just the Brooks Program, stripped of context and history. Elena called Adrian during her lunch break at work. They renamed it. Renamed what? David's program. The agenda for the board meeting just says Brooks Program Expansion Discussion. They took his name out of it. That's a branding decision. They do that to make it sound more institutional, less personal. But it was personal. That was the whole point. David created it as a personal mission. I know. And now they're making it their mission. That's what happens when you work within institutions. They absorb things and reshape them to fit their structure. Elena closed her eyes and tried to breathe through the anger. I hate this. I know, but you knew this was part of the deal. They get to position the program how they want. You get to make sure the actual work stays true to David's vision. That's the trade. What if I can't live with the trade? Then you walk away. You have an exit clause for a reason. Elena spent the rest of the afternoon distracted, making mistakes on insurance forms and having to redo them. Her coworker Brenda finally asked if she was okay. Just stressed about some volunteer work I've committed to. The foundation thing? Elena had mentioned it briefly when explaining why she'd needed to take a half day the previous week. Yeah, it's more complicated than I expected. Brenda, who was in her 60s and had raised 4 kids while working full-time, gave her a knowing look. Volunteer work is always more complicated than they tell you. They sell you on making a difference and then bury you in bureaucracy. If it's not working for you, it's okay to say no. But kids are depending on this program. Kids are resilient. They'll survive if this particular program doesn't expand exactly the way some foundation wants it to. But you won't survive if you burn yourself out trying to be everything to everyone. Elena thought about that all the way home. Mia was at Mrs. Chen's house again. Elena had been picking up extra shifts to save money for the possibility that the foundation thing didn't work out, and she needed a financial cushion. When she collected Mia, her daughter was in the middle of a heated Uno game with Mrs. Chen's grandson. 5 more minutes, Mom? Please? I'm winning. 5 minutes, then homework. Elena waited in the kitchen with Mrs. Chen, who poured her tea without asking if she wanted it. You look tired, dear. It's been a long week. That foundation work you mentioned before, is it going well? Elena wrapped her hands around the warm mug. Honestly, I don't know. I thought I was doing something good, honoring my husband's memory, helping kids. But now it feels like I'm just playing a role in someone else's story. Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. My husband died 12 years ago. Heart attack. Everyone told me I should keep his garden going, that it's what he would have wanted. So I tried. Spent 2 years maintaining those roses and vegetables and dealing with aphids and blight, and I was miserable. Finally, my daughter said, Mom, Dad loved that garden, but you don't have to. It's okay to let it go. Best advice I ever got. But I signed a contract. Contracts can be broken. People change their minds. It's allowed. Elena didn't have a response to that. When Mia finished her game, she'd won, naturally. They drove home in comfortable silence. That night, Elena helped Mia with math homework and made grilled chicken for dinner and tried not to think about the board meeting in 3 weeks. But Saturday came, as it always did, and with it came the park and Adrian and Sophie. The weather had warmed slightly. The snow from the previous week mostly melted. The girls ran toward the playground immediately, and Elena and Adrian fell into step beside each other. You've been quiet this week, Adrian observed. Just thinking. About the contract? About everything. About whether I'm doing the right thing. About whether trying to honor David's memory is worth sacrificing my sanity. Adrian didn't respond immediately. They walked past the playground toward the river path, their usual route. "Can I tell you about my dad?" he said finally. Elena looked at him, surprised by the shift. "Of course. He was a union electrician, worked construction his whole life. Never made a lot of money, but was proud of his work. When I was in my 20s, right after I started my own company, he got sick, cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to death. I'm sorry. Before he died, he told me he was proud of me for building something. Said he'd always wanted to start his own business, but never had the courage. And I felt this huge pressure to make the company successful, to prove that his pride was justified. So I worked 80-hour weeks, took every job I could get, drove myself into the ground trying to build this empire that would justify his faith in me. Did it work? For a while. The company grew, I made money, everything looked successful from the outside. But I was miserable, and my marriage was falling apart because I was never home. And one day my ex-wife said something that stuck with me. She said, "You're not building this for your father. You're building it to avoid feeling the grief of losing him." Elena stopped walking. Was she right? Completely. I was so focused on honoring his memory that I forgot to actually live my life. It took the divorce and almost losing Sophie to make me realize that the best way to honor him wasn't to build an empire. It was to do work I was proud of and have relationships that mattered. The rest was just noise. They started walking again, slower now. Elena processed what he'd said, feeling it click into place with her own situation. "You're saying I'm doing the same thing. I'm saying it's possible. Only you know for sure. But from the outside, it looks like you're trying so hard to honor David that you've forgotten to check if this is actually what you want, or if it's just what you think you're supposed to want. I want his program to help kids. Okay, but do you want to be the public face of it? Do you want to spend the next 18 months attending galas and telling your story to strangers? Or do you want that program to exist and help kids without you having to perform for it?" Elena didn't have an answer. They reached the coffee cart and ordered hot chocolates for the girls and regular coffee for themselves. Sophie and Mia ran up, breathless and happy, and claimed their drinks before racing back to the playground. "You don't have to decide today," Adrian said, watching the girls go, "but you should decide before that board meeting, because once you walk into that room, you're committing, and it'll be harder to walk away." Elena sipped her coffee and stared at the river. "What would you do?" "I can't answer that. Everyone's situation is different, but I can tell you what questions I'd ask myself. Does this feed my soul or drain it? Am I doing this because I genuinely want to, or because I feel obligated? And most importantly, if David were here, what would he actually want for me? He'd want me to be happy. Then maybe that's your answer." They spent the rest of the morning at the park, then went back to Elena's house for lunch. While the girls made sandwiches with more creativity than practicality, Mia's involved peanut butter, pickles, and potato chips. Elena and Adrian sat at the kitchen table with their own more conventional sandwiches. "I need to tell you something," Elena said, setting down her sandwich half-eaten. Adrian looked up. "Okay. That first night at the gala, when everyone was mocking us, I felt invisible. Like I'd spent 2 years being invisible, and that night just confirmed it. No one saw me as a person, just as this sad widow who used to be married to someone important. I remember. And then you saw me. Not as a story or a tragedy, just as a person dealing with an impossible situation. And that meant something. It still means something." Adrian reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused from work. "You're not invisible, Elena. Not to me, not to Mia, and not to anyone who's actually paying attention. The foundation makes me feel invisible again. They see David's story, not mine. They see a program to fund, not a person to respect. And I don't know if I can spend 18 months feeling like that." "Then don't. But the kids, will have other opportunities. Maybe not this exact program, maybe not right away, but there are always other ways to help. You don't have to sacrifice yourself to prove you care." Elena felt tears prick at her eyes. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just someone who learned these lessons the hard way and doesn't want to watch you make the same mistakes." Mia and Sophie came back to the table with their architectural sandwich creations, and the conversation shifted to more important matters like whether pickles belonged on peanut butter sandwiches. Elena voted no. Adrian diplomatically abstained, and both girls insisted it was delicious, even though neither of them finished their sandwiches. After lunch, while the girls played in Mia's room, Adrian helped Elena clean up the kitchen. "I think I'm going to turn it down," Elena said quietly. Adrian stopped drying a plate and looked at her. "The contract?" "Yeah, I thought I wanted this, but I don't. I want David's program to exist and help kids, but I don't want to be the face of it. I don't want to perform my grief for the next 18 months. I just want to live." "That's a valid choice." "Richard is going to be pissed." "Well, probably, but that's his problem, not yours. And the program might not get expanded." "Also possible, but there are other ways to help. Smaller ways maybe, but more sustainable for you." Elena nodded, feeling something settle in her chest. Relief, maybe. Or just the absence of the constant anxiety that had been sitting there since the gala. "I'll email him tomorrow. Give him time to find someone else." "Do you want me to look over the email before you send it?" "Yeah, that would help." That evening, after Adrian and Sophie left, Elena sat down at her laptop and drafted an email to Richard Ashworth. She explained that after careful consideration, she decided the spokesperson role wasn't the right fit for her. She thanked him for the opportunity and expressed hope that they'd find someone who could do justice to David's vision. She offered to help with the transition and to consult on the program expansion without being the public face of it. She read it 5 times, then sent it to Adrian. His response came quickly. "This is clear and professional. You're giving them a path forward without burning bridges." "Send it." Elena hit send before she could change her mind. The response from Richard came the next morning, Sunday, which surprised her. She'd expected him to wait until Monday, to respond during business hours with professional distance. Instead, his email arrived at 7 in the morning. "Elena, I'm disappointed, but I understand. This work isn't for everyone. However, I need to be clear about the implications. Without a compelling spokesperson, the board is unlikely to approve the expansion funding. The Brooks program will continue at its current size, but the growth opportunity will be lost. I hope you're prepared to live with that decision. If you change your mind in the next 48 hours, the offer still stands. After that, we'll move forward with other priorities." Richard Elena read the email 3 times, feeling the weight of the ultimatum. 48 hours to change her mind or watch David's program stay small. 48 hours to decide if she could live with choosing her own well-being over helping more kids. She called Adrian even though it was Sunday morning and she knew she was probably waking him up. "Hey," he answered, voice rough with sleep. "Everything okay?" Richard responded. He says without me as spokesperson, they won't expand the program. I have 48 hours to change my mind. That's a manipulation tactic. He's trying to make you feel responsible for a decision that's actually his. But if the program doesn't expand because of me, it won't be because of you. It'll be because the foundation chose to tie funding to you being their puppet. Those are different things. Elena sat down on her porch steps, cold air biting through her sweatshirt. "So what do I do? What do you want to do?" "I want to tell him to go to hell, but I also want David's program to help more kids." "Those 2 things might not be compatible." "I know." They talked for 20 minutes, Adrian walking her through the logic of Richard's ultimatum, helping her see the manipulation for what it was. By the time they hung up, Elena felt steadier. She didn't respond to Richard's email that day, or Monday. She went to work, picked up Mia from school, made dinner, helped with homework. Normal life continuing despite the decision hanging over her head. Tuesday evening, with an hour left before Richard's deadline, Elena sat down and typed a response. "Richard, thank you for clarifying the board's position. I understand that my decision impacts the expansion timeline, and I regret that. However, I need to prioritize my daughter's well-being and my own mental health. I'm not the right person to be your spokesperson, and trying to force myself into that role would be dishonest to everyone involved. I'm happy to consult on the program's curriculum and structure without being the public face. If that's not sufficient for your needs, I understand. I wish you and the Foundation success in your future endeavors. Sincerely, Elena." She sent it without asking Adrian to review it. This one needed to be fully hers. Richard's response came within minutes. "Your decision is noted. We'll be moving forward with other priorities. Good luck, Elena." And that was it. No fight, no negotiation, no attempt to change her mind, just a clean cut, professional and final. Elena stared at the email and waited to feel regret. Instead, she felt lighter. She texted Adrian. Did the thing. It's done. Proud of you. Want company? Actually, yeah, that would be nice. 20 minutes later, Adrian showed up at her door without Sophie. She's with her mom tonight. Figured you might want to talk without 8-year-olds listening. They sat on Elena's couch with tea that neither of them actually wanted, just needing something to do with their hands. I keep waiting to feel guilty, Elena said. Like I just screwed over a bunch of kids who could have benefited from an expanded program. But you don't feel guilty. No, I feel relieved. Is that wrong? It's human. You chose yourself and Mia over an institution that wanted to use you. That's not selfish. That's healthy boundaries. David would have... Elena stopped, realizing she didn't actually know what David would have done. She'd been speaking for him in her head for 2 years, imagining his reactions, trying to honor his wishes. But the truth was, he wasn't here, and she couldn't keep making decisions based on what a ghost might have wanted. David would have what? Adrian prompted gently. I don't know. I've been assuming I knew, but I don't. He's gone, and I'm here. And I have to make choices based on what I can actually live with, not what I think he would have wanted. Adrian set down his tea and turned to face her. That's the healthiest thing I've heard you say since we met. It feels selfish. It's not. It's survival. You can't honor someone's memory if you destroy yourself in the process. Elena leaned back against the couch, feeling exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. So what now? Now you live your life. You take Mia to school and go to work and have Saturday morning park days. You stop performing grief and start actually processing it. That simple? That hard? But yeah, basically. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Upstairs, Elena could hear Mia moving around in her room, probably supposed to be asleep, but definitely still awake. Can I ask you something? Elena said. Always. Earlier when you said you were interested in more than friendship, did you mean that? Or were you just being kind? Adrian's expression softened. I meant it. Still mean it. Even though I'm a mess? Everyone's a mess. You're just honest about it, which is refreshing. I'm not ready yet. I know. I'm still not going anywhere. Well, what if I'm never ready? What if I'm too broken from losing David? Then we stay friends, and that's enough. But I don't think you're broken, Elena. I think you're healing. And healing looks messy and slow, but it's still progress. Elena felt tears sliding down her face and didn't bother wiping them away. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for letting me be here. They stayed on the couch until Elena's tea went cold and Mia finally stopped making noise upstairs. Then Adrian stood up to leave and Elena walked him to the door. Saturday? He asked. Saturday. After he left, Elena checked on Mia, actually asleep this time finally, and then stood in the doorway of her own bedroom. David's watch was still on her nightstand where she'd left it after the meeting with Richard. She picked it up, held it for a moment, then put it back in her jewelry box. Not throwing it away, not forgetting him, just making space for the present instead of living in the past. She climbed into bed and slept better than she had in weeks. The next morning, Elena woke up to her phone buzzing with a text from a number she didn't recognize. Hi, Elena. This is Patricia from Adrian's office. He asked me to reach out. There's someone who'd like to meet with you about David's program. Would you have time this afternoon? No pressure, just a conversation. Elena stared at the message, trying to figure out what Adrian was up to. She texted back, who wants to meet? Better if they explain in person. 2 p.m. at the coffee shop on Maple Street? Elena had the afternoon off from work. Mia had a play date at a classmate's house until 5. She technically had the time, even if she had no idea what she was walking into. Okay, I'll be there. She spent the morning cleaning the house and trying not to overthink it. At 1:30, she changed into jeans and a sweater that made her look more put together than she felt, and drove to the coffee shop. It was a local place, not a chain, with mismatched furniture and art from community members on the walls. Elena ordered a latte and sat at a table near the window watching people walk by outside. At 2 o'clock exactly, the door opened and a woman walked in. She was maybe 60, African-American, wearing a practical wool coat and carrying a worn leather bag. She scanned the room, made eye contact with Elena, and smiled. Mrs. Brooks? I'm Denise Washington. Thank you for meeting with me. Elena stood up to shake her hand. Please, call me Elena, and I'm honestly not sure why I'm here. That's fair. Can I get a coffee first? Then I'll explain everything. Denise ordered at the counter and came back with a cappuccino. She sat down across from Elena and took a sip before speaking. I'm the director of the Community Education Alliance. We're a nonprofit that supports grassroots education programs across the state. Adrian Cole sits on our board and told me about David's summer science program and about the situation with the Westbridge Foundation. Elena felt her face flush. He told you I turned them down. He told me you chose integrity over money, which is rare and impressive. The foundation has a reputation for consuming programs and spitting out hollow versions that look good in annual reports, but don't actually serve kids. So why are you here? Denise leaned forward, hands wrapped around her coffee cup. Because we're interested in supporting David's program, not expanding it into something massive, but sustaining what exists and maybe growing it slowly, organically. We don't need a spokesperson. We don't do galas. We just fund programs that work and let the people running them do their jobs. Elena felt something crack open in her chest. Are you serious? Completely. We've reviewed David's curriculum and outcomes data. The program is solid. It doesn't need to be flashier or bigger. It just needs consistent funding so it can keep doing what it's already doing well. How much funding are we talking about? Enough to run the program at current capacity for the next 3 years, with annual reviews to assess whether expansion makes sense. We're talking maybe 30 kids per summer instead of the 200 the Westbridge Foundation wanted, but it'll be sustainable and true to David's vision. Elena's hands were shaking. She set down her latte before she spilled it. What's the catch? No catch. Well, one requirement. You'd need to serve on the program's advisory committee. Meet quarterly, review curriculum, make sure we're staying true to the mission. But that's behind-the-scenes work, not public-facing. No events? No telling my story to donors? We have donors who give because they believe in grassroots education, not because they want to hear tragic stories. You'd never have to perform your grief for us. Elena pressed her palms against her eyes, trying not to cry in a coffee shop. Why would you do this? Denise's expression was kind. Because 30 years ago, I was a single mother trying to get my kids through school while working 2 jobs. A program like David's gave my son access to science equipment and mentorship he never would have had otherwise. He's a chemical engineer now. Programs like this matter, Elena, and they matter more when they're run by people who actually care about kids instead of tax write-offs. Adrian set this up. Adrian mentioned your situation, but I did my own research. This is a good program that deserves support. Whether you say yes or no doesn't change that assessment. Elena wiped her eyes with a napkin. Can I think about it? Of course, take a week. Talk to the teachers who used to work with David. Talk to former students. Make sure this feels right. Here's my card. Call me when you've decided. Denise finished her cappuccino and stood up. One more thing. Adrian told me you've been carrying a lot of guilt about David's death, about not being able to keep his program alive at the scale he might have wanted. I just want you to know, from someone who's been in nonprofit education for 30 years, sustainable impact is better than flashy growth. Helping 30 kids really well is more valuable than helping 200 kids superficially. You haven't failed anything. After Denise left, Elena sat in the coffee shop for another 20 minutes, staring at the business card in her hand. Community Education Alliance, Denise Washington, Executive Director. A phone number and email address. No fancy logo, no embossed lettering, just practical information for people who did actual work. She called Adrian. Did you meet with Denise? He asked instead of saying hello. You ambushed me. I connected 2 people who could help each other. That's different. Adrian, before you get mad, just listen. I sit on their board because they do good work without the ego. When you told me about the Westbridge situation, I mentioned David's program to Denise. She researched it independently and decided it was worth funding. I didn't manipulate anything. I just opened a door. Elena closed her eyes. Thank you. You're welcome. Are you going to say yes? I don't know yet. I need to think. That's fair. Take your time. Will you help me if I decide to do this? I don't know anything about running a nonprofit program. You're not running it. You're advising. But yes, I'll help. And so will Denise. She's good at this. Elena picked up Mia from her playdate and drove home in a daze. That evening, while Mia did homework at the kitchen table, Elena pulled out David's files again. But this time, instead of reading them with guilt and obligation, she read them with curiosity. What had David actually built? What worked? What could be sustained? The program had served nearly 200 kids over 7 years. Not all at once, about 30 kids each summer, some returning for multiple years. The curriculum focused on hands-on experiments, with an emphasis on making science accessible to kids who'd never had lab access before. David had partnered with local high school teachers and college students to keep costs low. The budget had been modest but sufficient. It was good work, solid work, the kind that changed individual lives without trying to save the world. Elena spent the next 3 days calling people. Former teachers who'd worked with David, parents whose kids had participated, students who were now in college studying science. Everyone said the same thing. The program had been special because it was small and personal. Kids weren't just participants, they were known. Teachers weren't just instructors, they were mentors. By Saturday, Elena had her answer. She met Adrian at the park as usual, but this time she was carrying a folder of notes. "I'm going to say yes to Denise," she told him while the girls played on the swings. "Yeah? Yeah, I talked to everyone involved with the program. They all said the same thing. It worked because it was intimate and focused. Expanding it to 200 kids would have destroyed what made it special." That's smart research. I also called a few former students. One of them, Marcus, is studying biochemistry at the State University. He told me the summer program was the first time anyone had told him he was smart enough for science. He said David saw him, really saw him, in a way teachers at his underfunded school couldn't because they had too many students. If the program had been bigger, maybe David wouldn't have noticed Marcus, and Marcus wouldn't be studying biochemistry. Adrian nodded slowly. Impact at scale versus depth of impact. Exactly. And I'd rather honor David by keeping the depth. Then you have your answer. Elena called Denise that afternoon and said yes. They scheduled a meeting for the following week to go over logistics, budget, and timeline. Denise mentioned that they'd want to bring back some of the original teachers if they were available and work with the high school to coordinate space and equipment. "This is going to be good," Denise said. "I can feel it." 2 weeks later, Elena attended her first advisory committee meeting. It was held at the Community Education Alliance office, a modest space above a bookstore with secondhand furniture and whiteboards covered in program schedules. The committee consisted of Elena, 2 former teachers from David's program, a high school principal, and a college student who'd participated in the program 5 years ago and was now studying environmental science. They spent 2 hours discussing curriculum, enrollment process, budget allocation. Elena contributed ideas about what David had valued: accessibility, hands-on learning, mentorship relationships. No one treated her like a tragic figure or asked her to tell David's story. They just worked through problems like colleagues. Afterward, the college student, a young woman named Jasmine, pulled Elena aside. "I just want to say thank you. Mr. Brooks changed my life. He's the reason I went to college. And I'm glad you're keeping his program going." "You're the reason it's worth keeping going," Elena said. "You and kids like you." Jasmine smiled and left, and Elena felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years: pride that wasn't tangled up in grief. Over the next month, things settled into a new rhythm. Elena kept her part-time job at the medical office. She attended quarterly meetings for David's program but didn't make it her entire identity. She took Mia to school and helped with homework and went to the park every Saturday morning with Adrian and Sophie. And slowly, carefully, her relationship with Adrian began to shift. It started small. Adrian texting her in the middle of the day just to say something funny had happened. Elena calling him when she had a bad day at work and needed someone to listen. Their Saturday morning park visits extending into Saturday afternoon lunch, then Saturday evening dinner. The girls noticing and exchanging knowing looks that they thought were subtle but absolutely weren't. One Saturday in February, after the girls had gone to Mia's room to play, Adrian stayed in the kitchen with Elena while she cleaned up lunch dishes. "I need to tell you something," he said. Elena's stomach dropped. "Okay. I got a call from Caroline Ashworth yesterday." "What? Why?" Adrian leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "She wanted to know if I'd be interested in funding the Brooks program expansion since you'd turned down their spokesperson position." "She what?" Apparently, the board really did want to expand the program, but Richard couldn't sell it without a compelling story. So Caroline thought maybe if I funded it independently, they could still take credit for facilitating the connection. Elena felt anger rise in her chest. That's incredibly manipulative. That's Caroline. She can't stand losing control of a narrative. What did you tell her? I told her I was already supporting a grassroots version of the program through the Community Education Alliance, and that I wasn't interested in funding a Westbridge Foundation initiative. Then I told her that using grief as a fundraising tool was exploitative, and that she should be ashamed of herself for treating you the way she did at that gala. Elena stared at him. You said that? Word for word. She was not pleased. Adrian, she needed to hear it, and honestly, I've been wanting to say it for 3 years. She burned me, tried to burn my reputation, and I let it go because fighting with her felt pointless. But watching her try to manipulate you was the last straw. Elena set down the dish towel and walked over to him. They were standing close now, closer than friends usually stood. She could see the flecks of gray in his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that came from smiling, the calluses on his hands from actual work. Thank you, she said quietly, for standing up for me, for seeing what she was doing and calling it out. You shouldn't have to fight these battles alone. I'm not alone anymore. Adrian's expression softened. No, you're not. They stood there in her small kitchen, close enough that Elena could feel the warmth coming off him, and she realized something. She was ready. Not perfectly ready, not without fear or doubt, but ready enough to try. Adrian, she said. Yeah? Remember when you said you were interested in more than friendship? His eyes locked on hers. I remember. Is that still true? Very much. Then I think I'm ready to try, if you still want to. Adrian smiled, and it was the most genuine smile she'd seen on anyone's face in years. I still want to. I'm probably going to be a mess about it. I'm going to overthink and second guess and compare you to David, even though that's not fair. Elena, I know. And it's okay. And Mia already knows. She's been giving me meaningful looks for weeks. Elena laughed despite herself. She thinks she's so subtle. She's 8. Subtle isn't in her vocabulary. So what do we do now? Adrian reached out and took her hand, the same way he had that night at his office, warm and steady. We take it slow. We figure it out as we go. We don't try to be perfect. I can do slow. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. From upstairs came the sound of Mia and Sophie shrieking with laughter about something, and Elena felt a wave of gratitude so strong it nearly knocked her over. 6 months ago, she'd been sitting in the back corner of a ballroom, humiliated and invisible. Now she was standing in her kitchen holding hands with someone who saw her, really saw her, while their daughters became friends upstairs and David's program continued to exist in a way that honored what he'd actually built instead of what a foundation wanted it to be. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and real was enough. The weeks after that conversation brought small changes that felt significant. Adrian started staying for dinner more often. Sometimes they'd watch a movie after the girls went to bed, sitting on the couch with careful space between them at first, then gradually sitting closer. They held hands. They talked about their days. They learned each other's rhythms and habits. One evening in March, after Sophie had gone home and Mia was asleep, Adrian kissed Elena for the first time. It was gentle and tentative, like they were both remembering how this worked. When they pulled apart, Elena was crying. I'm sorry, she said, wiping her eyes. I'm not sad, You don't have to explain. I didn't think I'd feel this again. After David, I thought this part of my life was over. Adrian pulled her close, and she let herself lean into him. It's not over. It's just different. I'm going to keep loving David. That doesn't go away. I know, and I'm not asking you to stop. Love isn't finite, Elena. You can love who you lost and still love someone new. They're not in competition. She needed to hear that, needed to know that moving forward didn't mean leaving David behind. That night, after Adrian left, Elena went upstairs and stood in the doorway of Mia's room. Her daughter was asleep, one arm flung over her head, elephant tucked under the other arm. She looked peaceful in a way she hadn't for a long time after David died. The nightmares had stopped. The clinginess had eased. She was laughing more, worrying less. Elena thought about the gala, about Caroline Ashworth's calculated cruelty, about Richard's ultimatum. All of it had felt so important at the time, life or death stakes. But standing here now, watching her daughter sleep, Elena realized the only thing that had actually mattered was making choices she could live with, protecting what was real, building something sustainable instead of something impressive. In April, the summer science program officially relaunched under the Community Education Alliance. They had 28 enrolled students, 2 fewer than David's first year, but Denise said that was perfect. Small enough to be personal, big enough to be sustainable. Elena attended the opening day, watching kids file into the high school lab wearing donated safety goggles and carrying new notebooks. One of the teachers, Mr. Harrison, had worked with David for 3 years. He pulled Elena aside before the first session started. "I want you to know something," he said. "David didn't create this program to be famous or to build some empire. He created it because he saw kids slipping through the cracks and wanted to catch them. What you've done, keeping it small, keeping it focused, that's exactly what he would have wanted." "You think so?" "I know so." He used to say the best teaching happened in small groups where you could know every kid's name and learning style. He'd be proud of this. Elena stayed for the first hour of class, watching Mr. Harrison teach 17 kids about chemical reactions. She saw their faces light up when the experiments worked, saw them ask questions without fear of looking stupid, saw them helping each other when someone got confused. This was the work. This was the impact. Not gala speeches or foundation press releases, just kids learning science in a crowded lab on a Tuesday afternoon. She left before they noticed her crying. That summer passed in a blur of park Saturdays and program check-ins and quiet evenings with Adrian. In July, he took Elena and Mia to the beach for a long weekend. Sophie came too, and the girls built sandcastles while Adrian and Elena walked along the shore. "I've been thinking about something," Adrian said, watching the waves. "Yeah?" "Sophie asked me if you were my girlfriend. I told her yes. Was that okay?" Elena smiled. "I think Mia asked me the same question. I also said yes. So we're official in the eyes of 2 9-year-olds. Apparently. How do you feel about that?" Elena thought about it. 6 months ago, the question would have sent her into a spiral of guilt and grief. Now it just felt like the truth. "I feel good. Scared, but good." "The scared part doesn't go away?" "I don't think so. I'm scared I'll lose you like I lost David. I'm scared I'll mess this up. I'm scared Mia will get hurt if things don't work out. But I'm also happy. And the happy is bigger than the scared." Adrian took her hand. "Same." They walked in comfortable silence, and Elena let herself imagine a future. Not a perfect future where nothing went wrong, but a real one where they figured things out together. In August, Elena attended the end-of-summer celebration for David's program. Parents showed up to watch their kids present projects. Erupting volcanoes, electrical circuits, crystallized sugar structures. The energy was chaotic and joyful, exactly the way David would have wanted it. Jasmine, the college student on the advisory committee, was there helping coordinate. She pulled Elena aside during the reception. "I need to tell you something. I got accepted to a graduate program. I'm going to study environmental engineering." "Jasmine, that's incredible." "I wouldn't be here without Mr. Brooks's program, and I wouldn't have applied if you hadn't kept it going." Jasmine's eyes were wet. "Thank you for not letting it die." Elena hugged her, and they both cried a little, and it was messy and beautiful and everything David's work had been about. Real connections, real impact, real lives changed. That evening, Elena went home to find Adrian and the girls in her kitchen making dinner. Or trying to. Mia was arguing that dessert should come before vegetables. Sophie was insisting they needed more cheese on everything, and Adrian was attempting to referee while also preventing something from burning on the stove. "Mom," Mia announced, "we're making dinner." "I can see that. Do we need to order pizza?" "Probably," Adrian admitted, giving up on whatever was burning. They ended up ordering pizza and eating it on the back porch while the summer evening cooled into comfortable warmth. The girls talked about school starting in a few weeks. Adrian told a story about a construction project that had gone hilariously wrong. Elena just listened, soaking in the normalcy of it all. Later, after Sophie went home and Mia went to bed, Adrian stayed to help clean up. They stood at the sink together, Elena washing and Adrian drying, falling into a rhythm they'd developed over months of shared dinners. I need to tell you something, Elena said. Adrian looked at her. Okay. I love you. I know it's only been 6 months, and I know we said we'd take it slow, but I love you, and I need you to know that. Adrian set down the dish towel and turned to face her fully. I love you too. Have for a while now. Even though I'm a mess? You're not a mess. You're a person who's been through something terrible and came out the other side still capable of loving. That's not a mess. That's strength. Elena felt tears sliding down her face again, but this time they were the good kind. The kind that came from being seen and known and loved anyway. What do we do now? She asked. We keep doing what we're doing. We take care of our kids, we show up for each other, we build something real instead of something perfect. I can do that. I know you can. I've been watching you do it for 6 months. They finished the dishes and sat on the couch, Elena's head on Adrian's shoulder, and talked about nothing important until it got late and he had to leave. At the door he kissed her goodnight, and Elena felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years, certain that tomorrow would be good. The following weekend, both families went to the park together. It was late September, leaves just starting to turn, the air carrying the first hint of fall. The girls ran ahead toward the playground, and Elena and Adrian followed at their usual pace. You know what I was thinking about? Elena said. What's that? That gala. Table 12. How angry and humiliated I felt. Yeah, that was rough. But if Caroline hadn't seated us together as a joke, we never would have met. If that whole disaster hadn't happened, David's program would have either gotten swallowed by the foundation or died completely. And I'd still be trying to carry everything alone. Adrian considered this. So you're saying Caroline accidentally did us a favor? I'm saying her cruelty led to something good, even though that wasn't her intention. She wanted to humiliate us. Instead, she connected us. Poetic justice. Something like that. They reached the playground and sat on their usual bench. Sophie and Mia were showing off for each other on the monkey bars, competing to see who could go across without falling. Do you ever wonder what David would think? Adrian asked. About us, I mean. Elena had thought about this a lot lately. I think he'd be happy I'm not alone. He wouldn't want me to spend the rest of my life grieving. He'd want Mia to have a stable family and for me to have someone to share things with. Even if that someone is me? Especially if that someone is you. You're exactly the kind of person David would have liked. Someone who sees through bullshit and cares about real things. Adrian squeezed her hand. I wish I could have met him. Me too. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughters play. Around them, the park was full of families, kids on swings, dogs chasing tennis balls, couples walking hand in hand. Normal life continuing in all its messy, beautiful complexity. 6 months ago, Elena had been invisible. Sitting in the back corner of a ballroom, dismissed and humiliated, wondering if she'd ever feel seen again. Now she was sitting on a park bench holding hands with someone who loved her, watching her daughter laugh with her best friend, knowing that David's program was continuing in a way that honored what he'd actually built. It wasn't the story the Westbridge Foundation had wanted to tell. It wasn't impressive or flashy or worthy of a gala speech, but it was real, and real was enough. Mia ran over, breathless and happy. Mom, can we get hot chocolate? Sure, baby. Sophie's dad is paying. I didn't agree to that, Adrian called out, but he was smiling. They walked to the coffee cart together, 4 people who'd been brought together by cruelty and chose to build something kind instead. Elena ordered hot chocolate for the girls and regular coffee for herself and Adrian. When the vendor handed over the drinks, Mia's had a marshmallow snowman floating on top. It's like last time, Mia said, delighted. Some things stay good, Elena said, and meant it. They spent the rest of the morning at the park, then went back to Elena's house for lunch. While the girls made their elaborate sandwiches, Adrian and Elena sat at the kitchen table making much simpler ones. I've been thinking, Adrian said. About what comes next. For us, I mean. Elena's heart jumped. Like what? Nothing dramatic, just maybe we stop pretending this is casual. Maybe we tell people we're together. Maybe we start planning more than a week ahead. You want to go public? If you're ready, no pressure. Elena thought about it, thought about what it would mean to tell her coworkers, David's parents, her friends, to admit that she was moving forward, building something new, letting herself love again. "I'm ready," she said. "Are you?" "I've been ready." "Okay then, let's tell people." Mia and Sophie came back to the table with their sandwiches, and the conversation shifted to more important matters like whether pickles really did belong on peanut butter sandwiches. But under the table, Elena and Adrian's hands were linked, and that small connection felt like a promise of everything that came next. That evening, after Adrian and Sophie left, Elena called David's parents. She'd been dreading this conversation for months, worried about how they'd react to her dating again. But sitting in her kitchen with the dishes done and Mia asleep upstairs, she knew it was time. "Elena," David's mother answered, "how lovely to hear from you. How's Mia?" "She's good, growing like a weed, but I actually called to tell you something." "Oh?" Elena took a breath. "I've been seeing someone, a man named Adrian. We met at a foundation event, and we've been dating for about 6 months. I wanted you to know." There was a pause, then David's mother said, "That's wonderful, dear." "It is?" "Of course. David would want you to be happy. He'd want Mia to have a stable family. We've been hoping you'd find someone." Elena felt tears burning in her eyes. "I was so worried you'd be upset." "Upset? Elena, you're 34 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. David's been gone for 2 years. We don't expect you to stay alone forever." They talked for another 20 minutes, and David's mother asked questions about Adrian and told Elena she'd like to meet him sometime. When they hung up, Elena sat at the kitchen table and cried, not from sadness, but from relief. Over the next few weeks, Elena told more people. Her coworkers at the medical office, who were universally excited for her. Mrs. Chen from down the street, who'd been not so subtly hinting that Elena should start dating. Brenda from work, who said finally, and then gave her a long lecture about not settling for someone who didn't treat her right. And slowly, Elena's life continued to knit itself into something whole. Not perfect, not without pain or complication, but whole. In October, the Community Education Alliance held a small appreciation event for program volunteers and staff. Elena attended with Adrian, and Denise pulled them both aside. "I have news," Denise said. "We got a grant. Nothing huge, but enough to expand the summer program to 40 kids next year. And we want to officially name it the David Brooks Summer Science Program. Not the Brooks Program, not some generic title, his full name, to honor what he built." Elena's throat tightened. "Really?" "Really. If you're comfortable with it." "I'm comfortable with it. Thank you." That night, Elena told Mia about the program being named after her father. Mia was quiet for a moment, then said, "Does that mean Daddy's work isn't gone?" "His work was never gone, baby. It's been here the whole time, helping kids learn science." "Good. I don't want people to forget him." "They won't, I promise." Mia went to sleep that night holding the elephant that had been David's, and Elena stood in the doorway watching her daughter breathe and felt the weight of 2 years of grief finally starting to lighten. December came with snow and holiday preparations, and the chaos of two families trying to figure out how to navigate first holidays together. Adrian's ex-wife had Sophie for Christmas Eve, so Adrian came to Elena's house for Christmas dinner with just the 3 of them. Mia made place cards with elaborate drawings. Elena cooked a ham that turned out slightly dry but edible. They exchanged small gifts and watched a movie and fell asleep on the couch together while Mia snored softly in her room. It was imperfect and beautiful and exactly right. On New Year's Eve, they went to a community event at the park. Bonfire, hot chocolate, countdown to midnight. Sophie and Mia ran around with other kids while Adrian and Elena stood by the fire, hands linked. "What are you hoping for this year?" Adrian asked. "More of this. More normal. More days that don't feel like I'm drowning." "That's a good goal. What about you?" Adrian looked at her, and in the firelight she could see the warmth in his eyes. "I'm hoping we keep building this. That we figure out how to be a family, however that looks. That we keep showing up for each other. I think we can do that." When midnight came, they kissed while fireworks exploded overhead and their daughters cheered with the crowd. And Elena felt something she hadn't felt since before David died, certain that the future held good things. The months after that brought continued small changes. In March, Adrian's lease was up on his house, and he started talking about finding something bigger. He didn't explicitly suggest moving in together, but the implication was there, hanging between them like a question neither was quite ready to ask. "What do you think?" he asked Elena one evening after the girls had gone to bed. "I think Mia would love having Sophie around all the time, and I think it would be good for both of them to have more stability." "But what do you think? For yourself?" Elena considered this carefully. "I think I'd like to try. Not right away. Let's give it a few more months. But eventually, yes, I think I want to build a life with you. Even though it's scary? Especially because it's scary. The scary things are usually worth doing." In June, they found a house together. Nothing fancy, just a 4-bedroom in a good school district with a backyard big enough for the girls to play in. They moved in together in July, 1 year after that first beach trip, and spent weeks unpacking boxes and arguing about where furniture should go and learning how to share space. It was hard and frustrating, and occasionally resulted in arguments about whose turn it was to do dishes. But it was also good, coming home to someone, sharing coffee in the morning before the girls woke up, having backup when Mia had a meltdown or Sophie's homework was incomprehensible. On the anniversary of David's death, Elena took flowers to his grave alone. She sat there for an hour, talking to him in her head, telling him about the program and Mia and Adrian, telling him she was sorry if moving forward felt like leaving him behind, telling him she loved him and always would, but that she'd found a way to live again. When she got home, Adrian was waiting on the porch with coffee. "How are you?" he asked. "Sad, but okay." "That's allowed." "I know." They sat together in silence, and Elena let herself feel all of it, the grief that never fully went away, the love for what she'd lost, the gratitude for what she'd found. All of it could coexist. All of it was real. That summer, the David Brooks Summer Science Program served 42 students. Elena attended the end-of-summer celebration with Adrian and both girls. She watched kids present projects and saw parents beam with pride and felt David's presence there, not as a ghost, but as a legacy made real. One student, a shy 12-year-old named Marco, had built a working water filtration system from household materials. He explained how it could be used in communities without clean water access, how it was cheap and replicable, and could save lives. Elena watched him present and thought about the drunk donor at the gala, who'd called her and Adrian charity cases. Thought about Caroline Ashworth's calculated cruelty. Thought about Richard's ultimatum. All of that had felt so important at the time, so devastating. But standing here now, watching Marco explain his project to a room full of people who actually cared about impact instead of optics, Elena realized something. She'd won. Not the way the foundation had wanted her to win, not with galas and press releases and her grief on display, but she'd protected what mattered. She'd chosen integrity over performance. She'd built something real. That evening, back at home, Elena stood in the kitchen making dinner while Adrian helped the girls with homework at the table. Mia was struggling with fractions. Sophie was breezing through a reading assignment. It was loud and chaotic and completely ordinary. "Mom," Mia said, looking up from her worksheet, "are you happy?" Elena stopped chopping vegetables and looked at her daughter. "Yeah, baby, I really am." "Good. You deserve to be happy." "So do you." "I am happy. I have Sophie now, and Adrian, and you're not sad all the time anymore." Elena walked over and hugged her daughter tight, not caring that she was getting flour on Mia's shirt. "I love you so much." "I love you too, Mom, even when you make me do fractions." That night, after the girls were asleep, Elena and Adrian sat on the back porch watching fireflies. It was quiet except for the crickets and the distant sound of traffic. "You know what I realized today?" Elena said. "What's that?" "A year ago, I was so focused on doing things the right way, honoring David's memory properly, making the program as big as possible, proving I wasn't failing, and I was miserable. And now? Now I'm focused on doing things the real way. Not perfect, not impressive, just real. And I'm happy." Adrian pulled her close. "Real is always better than perfect. Even when real is messy, especially then." They sat in comfortable silence, and Elena let herself feel the fullness of this moment. The house behind them with their sleeping daughters, the man beside her who saw her completely and loved her anyway. The program David had built continuing to help kids in exactly the way he'd intended. The life she'd constructed from grief and determination and the willingness to keep showing up even when it was hard. It wasn't the story anyone had expected. Not the foundation, not David's parents, not even Elena herself. But it was her story, and it was enough. Somewhere in the city, Caroline Ashworth was probably planning another gala, seating more people at table 12, using more stories for tax-deductible performances. But that wasn't Elena's concern anymore. She'd walked away from that world and built something better. She'd learned that being invisible to people who didn't matter was actually freedom. That choosing yourself wasn't selfish. That love didn't run out just because you gave it to someone new. That impact measured in individual lives changed was more valuable than impact measured in dollars raised. And she'd learned that sometimes the cruelest moments led to the best outcomes, not because cruelty itself was good, but because surviving it taught you what actually mattered. Adrian squeezed her hand. What are you thinking about? Everything. Nothing. How grateful I am that Caroline Ashworth is terrible at seating charts. Adrian laughed. Best case of incompetence I've ever witnessed. Should we send her a thank you card? Let's not push it. Elena smiled and leaned into him, and they sat there as the summer evening cooled and the fireflies blinked and life continued in all its imperfect, messy, beautiful complexity. She'd gone to that gala expecting nothing and found everything, and that was worth more than all the foundation funding in the world.